The afternoon session. We hope that you had a fantastic lunch and gained some business connections during the networking lunch. And please note that there will be no coffee break this afternoon, but there's self-serving coffee, tea, and drinks at the foyer outside, so please help yourself if needed. To present the conference special publication titled FinTech, a Game Changer, and to moderate the session. And we want to thank KPMG for sponsoring this publication. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Wu.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizing committee of APBF, to the UN and UNESCAP, and to Cyberport as well, for us to be here and giving KPMG the opportunity to do this report. So this report, FinTech, a Game Changer, Transforming Sustainable Finance Across Asia, is outside in the foyer. If you haven't picked up a copy, do so. And the panel will be made up of the people that we have shown in the report. So to start with, I think just setting the scene, myself, I'm not a fintech, I'm not a techie guy, and I'm a sustainable development guy. But being in KPMG, you do get to see a lot of things happen. And I have seen the development of fintech, and I have seen a lot of development in the sustainability space. But to be honest with you, those conversations do not usually come together. It's usually fintech and technology over here, sustainable development over there. And with this report, we were able to bring these two conversations together. And with this being a UNESCAP event, of course, we're going to talk about the SDGs and how fintech is actually helping with the development of the SDGs. So the actual topic of fintech is actually very broad. When you talk about fintech, you're not talking about one industry, but multiple different industries. You can talk about insurance, you can talk about e-commerce, payment gateway, regulation, and all of those things. So it is difficult to just say fintech. And just like when you say smart city, it can mean so many different things. In the report, we have really predominantly focused on the payments gateway aspect and some of the regulatory aspects of fintech as well. And how these, and also lending and crowdfunding and all of that, and how these actually impact on the sustainable development goals. And so with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has issued in 2015, we feel that there were 5 that really fintech has a major focus on and a major impact on. The natural ones is the one on 8, 9, and 10 on decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and reduce inequality. But another one that is actually helping is also in the area of SDG 5, in gender equality. Because as we were talking to some of our panelists, we understand that a lot of these microfinance is made to females. Small businesses developed by female entrepreneurs. And my understanding is that female entrepreneurs are actually safer at returning the money than their male counterparts in this space. So in many ways, these are the 4 that we feel has the biggest impact when we're talking about fintech. And when we talk about all of this stuff and about sustainable development, we really cannot neglect the fact that there is significant inequality in the world. We live in a city, Hong Kong, with the highest Gini coefficient in the world, the Gini coefficient being the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And as you can see from this chart, still around 80% of the world and of Asia Pacific is still operating on income less than $10,000 per annum. Interestingly, what I found quite interesting about this chart is that at the 100,000 to 1 million, the percentage in Asia Pacific is actually higher than the rest of the world. So we do have a lot of haves here in Asia. We do also have a lot of entrepreneurs here in Asia and a lot of very smart people. And how do we actually bring about this understanding of inclusive growth together with business success into one conversation? And I do really appreciate Mr. Pedro Eloy, who is going to moderate a breakout session tomorrow about young entrepreneurship and how he's helping a lot of the young entrepreneurs connect the SDGs with their business plan. Because I don't think that they are separate. They are really one of the same. And we can hear from some of the panelists later that they are actually complementing each other. And there is a huge business opportunity. This is a survey that was done in 2016. So quite recent. I would get probably 1 year out of date. But I think if you look at the right side, that is in India, China, and Southeast Asia, you have over 1 billion people that is unbanked. And that is, that is 1/7 of the world population that doesn't have the access that we take for granted in terms of financial services. And that is a business opportunity that is ahead of us. And I think that I have heard in the sustainability space, since I've been involved in this area over 10 years ago, about selling or serving the bottom of the pyramid and how to make a business case out of it. And it has never been very easy. But I think that the technological advancements now is allowing us to really help them and also tap into this market. So from that perspective, I think that this is something that is ahead of us, and encouraging fintech entrepreneurs to really think about how do you help with inclusive growth and also see an explosion in your business. And we also showcased one example in the report, and it's about Yuebao, which is a subsidiary of Alibaba. So who has heard of Yuebao here? Ooh, not many, a few. So this article is from Financial Times last year, and in April last year, Yuebao became the largest money market fund in the world. And how did that happen? Alibaba, through Alipay, was just aggregating, small amounts of money that people have together to form this money market fund and help them invest and get a return on those small bits of cash that they have. So this is what's happening in China, and it is growing. In the 4 years, it became the #1 money market fund. And what I want to say here is the possibility of aggregation, and the fact that we are also along the Belt and Road in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, and Central Asia as well. We probably have a lot of fellow citizens that is keeping their money under their pillow or somewhere in a can underneath the bed, etc. But what if they can actually get some return for that money rather than see it devalue over time? So these are some of the opportunities that are out there. And Yuebao has actually tapped into that possibility and has seen a huge development of their business. And of course, in this space of fintech, it is filled with risks and opportunities. I talked a lot about the opportunities, but the risks are also very much in place. And when we interviewed Mr. Masato Abe of UNESCAP, he did emphasize that this has to be taken with caution because of this space being less regulated than traditional banking, and how the lack of regulatory framework can actually impact its development and create financial issues globally. Of course, you're also looking at fraudulent operators. Of course, none of them are here, but there are many out there. And how can regulators and governments protect their citizens from these fraudulent operators? And of course, also about financial literacy. And in the developing countries where citizens do not have the financial services available to them as we do here, their financial literacy may be lower than us. How can governments, multilateral organizations like the UN or regulators, etc., help to upscale their financial literacy so that they can identify these fraudulent operators, etc.? And I don't have to talk about things like cybersecurity, etc. That is also always an issue that we face in our world right now. And that is why these fintech sandboxes have been developed in many jurisdictions by their regulators. These sandboxes are frameworks upon which regulators can actually work together with these fintech entrepreneurs to test their business models, but to also help the regulators understand their business model and how to regulate it. And we do have somebody here, Mr. Kusenov from the Astana International Financial Center, who has done these sandboxes with local entrepreneurs here in Hong Kong, getting a sandbox license from Kazakhstan. But of course, these sandboxes are also available through the HKMA here in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and also the MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So a lot of regulators and quasi-government institutions are also using these sandboxes to help develop this space and also understand how to regulate. So really, to conclude, that there is a huge connection between fintech development and sustainable development. And we are at the cusp of the possibility of financial inclusion and helping a lot of these countries, developing countries, leapfrog into the digital era. And that is what is ahead of us. And if fintech entrepreneurs are smart enough, like some of our panelists, to tap into that, it will be a very successful case study, but also will help with the development of that nation. But all of this has to happen in an orderly manner. Otherwise, we could be looking at another financial crisis. And how can regulators and governments and multilateral organizations like the UN steer this development in a way that is beneficial to all? So I hope that you will be able to pick up a copy of that and do read it and do give us some feedback. And that's the end of my presentation. So the next thing is that I will be inviting all of our panelists to come on up here for our panel discussion. So we have 4 panelists. So may I first invite Mr. Fang Yu Kiet, Vice Chairman and CEO of the Chongqing FinTech Group. Mr. Fang. And yes, and second, we'll have Mr. Nurlan Kusenov from the CEO of the Astana International Financial Center. He just arrived this morning. And thank you for attending the APBF. And next, I'd like to invite Mr. Frank Tong of HSBC, the Global Head of Innovation and Technology Investments. Frank. And last but not least, Mr. Alex Kong, founder and group CEO of TNG, one of the poster boys of fintech in Hong Kong. Well, welcome, panelists. First of all, I'd like to invite Mr. Fang to make a presentation about the Chongqing FinTech Group. And we'd like to first thank you for being one of the major sponsors of APBF, without which this would not be happening. So thank you so much, and may we give him a round of applause. So Mr. Fang, I'll pass it to you.
Am I flipping through? Yeah.
So,
This is all right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the invitation of Pat, he asked me to prepare a quick 10 minutes, quick experience sharing of how Chongqing has been built. I thought I would share with the audience about our own, in 2014, 4 years ago, how did the concept of FinTech come about, and how did we build our business in the last couple of years. Digital evolution, when we look at 80s, it is about the computer era. In the 90s, we are talking about internet connecting us all together. 2000, we are talking about the mobile phone eras. And 2010 onwards, we are consumed with the apps and the development of apps. And the second thing is the digital evolution is about, in the 90s, you're talking about the emails and the search engine. In 2000, you're talking about the mobile phone, the SMS, as well as the e-commerce. 2010, it is about the mobile apps and the FinTech. Now, with that, today, in my world, it is dominated, in the digital economy, is dominated by the word FinTech. But in a nutshell, what is the definition of FinTech? I pick up a very interesting definition from EY. They say, organization combining innovative business model and technology, enabling, enhance, and disrupt financial services. This is FinTech. Banking using technology, banks have been using technology, have been adopting technology for the last 40 years. So theoretically, we don't call that FinTech. It is new technology within the financial services that is looking to disrupt the financial services. That is what FinTech is about. Borrowing that and then borrowing KPMG definition. In my board, we are a public listed company. I have subdivided my FinTech definition into 11 subcategories. Ranges from lending, payment, insurance, RegTech, data analytics, etc. Why do we need to subdivide them, or else it gets too convoluted? We don't know what we are focusing on. And therefore, it is important to get a clear definition within the board and say, what do we do and what do we not do? That was what's critical. And in the next 5 minutes, I'll give you a condensed version of what Chongqing FinTech have done. In 2013, when I joined the board in December of a public listed company, we started with zero. Zero means every single transaction we are processing manually. So nothing is straight through. Today, we process more than 1 million straight-through transactions a day. We are adding more than 10 million registered users every quarter, and we are processing more than $1 billion a day within our FinTech ecosystem. So these are all straight-through transactions in my ecosystem world. We built the system, and the user then engage and get on to work to access the services. Our journey have not been easy. So today we have, as of end of December last year, we have over 73 million registered users. We have declared a profit of 800 million last year, over a 4.8 billion revenue. That was in 2017. Our transformation actually went slowly. In 2014, 2015, we were building against an online wealth management model. Discipline 2 years, nothing else but religiously making the ecosystem work. And then in the 2016 and 2017, that is where I adopted a strategy 2.0, and that is to enhance against my payment system, to enhance the service offering within the fintech world. And then in 2018, I tried to simplify my business model. Now, probably what is in your mind is, why is Chongqing changing a strategy every 2 years? Let me tell you, my 2 years is in the pressure cook 2 years. So in a traditional business, 1 year, on an average day, you work 8 to 10 to 12 hours days. We work 24. We work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So our 1 year potentially is equivalent to approximately, my own definition is 5 to 8 years in a traditional world. Okay, so every 2 years is equivalent to I've gone through a 5 years cycle. So therefore, we need to refine our strategy. If you look at currently my focus in a simplified business model, payments is going to be an important component. I'm going to be focusing on Asia. Technology-enabled lending is another focus. Blockchain is my third areas of focus, and others. So the transformation of users in the table, we begin first year humble. After working really hard, the first million registered user. Second year, 5 million. Third year, 32 million. Fourth year, 73 million. In terms of payment, what they call straight-through transaction, you have gone from 1.8 million in the first year, second year, 13 million, third year, 93, and then last year, over 500 million transaction was straight-through process. Last year, in total settlement volume, we cleared 2.7 trillion renminbi worth of payment-related transaction in the group. So against payments, mobile POS as well as online payments is our core focus. In total, these are some of the products that we offer. In terms of technology-enabled lending, that means we have the technology to lend to a blue-collar consumer payday loan. The amount of information that we have accumulated in a short 3 years, totaling our data center have 400 terabytes. 400 terabytes of information giving data modeling against a borrower. So with an apps, we extract the information, and then within 10 seconds from submission, we broadly score a person based on their behavior. And then if the loan is approved, within 56 seconds, the money is credited into the person's account. Now, these are very, very small loan, nano loan, $300 to $1,500. And they need to pay. Last year, the payment date was shorter, 21 days, and then the Chinese regulators came out and say, too short. You have to lend minimum 50 days, and therefore we are adapting our business model. And then this blockchain, we have came into the world of blockchain about 2.5 years. We studied for a year, and we started to make investment about 18 months ago. Today, we manufactured data mining machines that you put in data center to mine Bitcoins. We have mining centers across in different parts of the world, and we also have more than 100 developers writing software using blockchain technology. The last thing, my challenges, and I'll share openly with the audience, 4 challenges. For me, acquiring talents and retaining talents is my main core challenges. The second thing is to keep up with technological innovation is also a challenge. The third thing is our ability to adapt to the evolving regulatory environment is another challenge. And the last thing is, how do we take the very matured business that we have in one country, how do we replicate to the other countries? And those are the basic challenges that I have in the company. So with that, I conclude, I pass it back to Pat. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fang, and congratulations. Those were very impressive numbers, and all the panelists were looking at each other. It's been greatly successful. I'd like to follow up with a couple of those points that you had at the end. My understanding is initially the majority of your business has been in China, but now you guys are developing into Southeast Asia. And through that investment in Amigo Technologies in Vietnam, amongst others, you're facing different regulators, changing regulations in China as well. And when I was interviewing you, you gave a sense that you felt that the understanding of fintech by regulators was not as good as you would have liked, and it was always seen as a startup, but by those numbers, I don't see those as startup numbers. You also mentioned that you felt that multilateral organizations like UN can really help in its development. So in terms of dealing with regulators and also getting somebody like a UN involved, so can you talk a little bit more about those two areas?
Yes, thank you very much. I think one sometimes have a in their subtle mind when we use the word fintech to a traditional banker, to the regulators, they are always thinking that this must be a startup. Now, when you do startup and you start taking money from the society to be able to help to do wealth management, how to process it, it could be very dangerous if the people do not know how to manage it. Now, I had the privilege of, in my previous 20 years before joining the fintech, before doing the startup, I was working in a commercial bank. I did not only have the privilege of working in the bank, from the wholesale bank to the retail bank, did acquisition of banks. I also have the rare privilege of starting a brand new bank in China on a joint venture basis, China Bohai Bank. So that gave me a level of understanding which otherwise I would have not got the opportunity to understand. I think if you walk into the streets in Hong Kong or anywhere else, you ask the people who work in the bank, have you started a bank? They'll probably tell you they have worked in a bank. And 99% of the people work in a bank. 1% of them have got the privilege of doing M&A of a bank. But probably 1 in 100,000 will say they have got a chance to start a bank. So the experience of starting from ground zero, where you do not have a policy, you do not have a risk framework, you do not have the marketing, the products in place, is challenging. And therefore, don't underestimate the challenges in that. And in the case of a fintech, if it involves taking consumers' money, that is where I have been engaging with a lot of regulators to get them to think about how to bring on board the bigger organizations for them to participate in the space of fintech. That is point number one. Point number two, frankly, I think UN, especially UNESCAP with 53 member states, is in a very good position to give, drawing on professionals like yourself in KPMG, EY, and all the consulting firm to try to educate the different government agencies in the 53 member states and share with them some of what fintech can actually help in the country in terms of financial inclusion. The example which was presented by yourself in Yuepao in the first year was able to assemble 81 million registered users. In the first year, they were able to assemble 90 billion US dollars, but obviously that is in China, okay? But the fact that you are able to assemble, otherwise it will be loose change under the pillow or loose change in your tin box in your kitchen, and then to make them into a money market fund is extremely, extremely powerful. And I'm sure with our effort, the entire audience who come together, when we put our energy in support of what UN is trying to help on the commercial side, we can lend them some of this experience to facilitate the communication with the government. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fang, for your thoughts. And I think without UNSCAP and what they've been doing, perhaps we may not have Mr. Kusenov sitting right here. Because my understanding is that we had a meeting in Astana last June, and you then visited Hong Kong last October and visited Cyberport and all of this stuff. So, you know, I think that that's kind of like showing that UN is putting people together, putting us in Hong Kong and in Asia together with Central Asia in Kazakhstan. And you, as CEO of Astana International Financial Center, AIFC, is developing fintech, amongst other things. So as CEO of AIFC, perhaps you can do an introduction of what is happening in Astana.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here. And before I start talking about AIFC, I want to give a big thanks for UNSCAP and Cyberport for inviting. And indeed, this story is happened that we started to collaborate with UN escape program, and it was just regular talk, and then after we started to implement the fintech concept, fintech sandbox within the AIFC, we managed already to attract a few players from Hong Kong to our part of the world. When I first time was in Hong Kong, 2006 or 2005, I was here in Cyberport as well, and many others places around Hong Kong, and we were here in the context of understanding the cluster approach and how the cluster economy was helpful to build the competitiveness society. And that time I wouldn't dream that we would have, I mean, we just had Hong Kong as a showcase, and I wouldn't dream that we would have the Hong Kong as a business partner after 10, 12 years for building the financial services in Kazakhstan. It's very challenging to build financial center in Kazakhstan because we are largest landlocked country in the world. And if you would see pattern of the conventional financial centers for last 200 or 300 years, they were developing around the seaports. So not many financial centers in the world are existing without seaport. When we say seaport, we talk about large seaport like Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, Dublin, and others, London, Tokyo. So, and we are not only the largest landlocked country in the world, but we also have only 18 million people. And for fintech, it's still very challenging because for fintech, when we talk about inclusive society and bringing through the fintech more population, which is unbanked population mainly, it's not, I mean, we still have, in terms of, in relative figures, we have half of our country unbanked, but still it's only, say, 9 million people. So in the context of Chinese economy or Indian economy, this is one town or one village. So it's it's very difficult. And what we can bring to the table, why we believe that we still can be successful in building fintech kind of financial center in Kazakhstan. I think one of the first luxury we have, which not any other financial centers in the world have, that we're building everything from the scratch. And we were talking about regulatory frameworks today and how the conventional regulators still very difficult for them to transform from the pure banking regulator and pure kind of reacting type of supervision, building reacting type of supervision of the financial regulation. So we can do things differently. So from the beginning, and we're trying. It's not easy again, but we believe that we have very good fintech board, advisory board, and still friends from Hong Kong who managed to bring us here in that board. And we really cautious about not overwhelm the regulation of the financial services within the AFC sandbox. Tomorrow, in the digital Silk Road, the session, they will be presenting one friend who is applying, already going through the process, and probably he will give more details about the process itself. But in general, we really try to cater the need for the fintechs, real fintech companies, not financial, not the banks, not pure SMEs, but those who already matured to be presenting serious part of the business, but in the same time they happen not to be the traditional bankers or traditional payment company or traditional, I don't know, insurance company. So we really try to use that opportunity. And one of the most important kind of, again, it's probably we converting our challenge of being landlocked country into something different is having big neighbors like Russia, China, Iran, and India. And it's happened to be that around Kazakhstan, with 2 hours, 3 hours flight approximately, we have 5 largest IT outsourced companies, countries in the world. It's Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, India, and Pakistan. So we are not very much techie nation so far. We of course we're doing a lot of changes in the education. A lot of we're trying to bring a lot of expertise from US, UK, Asia to really reshape our approach to preparing the IT, financial experts, new type of lawyers, new type of regulators, engineers, but in the same time we can really, it's low-hanging fruit for us. We believe that we can really bring from the region a lot of smart people, and in the same time we speak Russian. We understand Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainians very well, and in the same time AFC itself, it's purely English-speaking territory. So we have a special legislation. It's English common law. It's independent judges and independent court system. So we kind of balancing between regional focus, but with global standards. So this is probably something we can really offer to the table, unique. And probably one more very unexpected feature of Kazakhstan and for the fintech is we also try to be, because financial centers tend to be very expensive. So I'm not going to talk, you know better than me how expensive real estate in Hong Kong or London or Tokyo. And we try to be cost-effective financial center. So we do not offer, we want to offer very comparable real estate component. We want to feed the tech companies, fintech companies, with very professional, high quality, but very comparable human resources. And we're preparing, we have a special program, we have a Bureau for Continuous Education, and we work with the Techstars, we do incubation. And beyond the AFC, government is investing a lot into the other initiatives around. And we try to really combine it and bring the AFC to the map. Actually, recently we were shown up in the GFI, the index for the financial centers, and we already got some position in the beginning. It's in the 80s, but it's just the beginning, and we hope to continue our path. I would stop here because I can talk a lot, But I'm sure there will be questions, and probably I will be more handy if I'll give respond to any particular question.
So thank you very much. And Mr. Kusenov, just picking up on a couple of the points that you mentioned, I think that, you know, that you can start at the beginning. So you're not having to kind of change regulation. You can effectively develop the regulation that is already facilitating fintech up front. And I think that that's one of the key points that we'd like to highlight is the possibilities of leapfrog that is available. The second one that you mentioned is that, you know, that 50% of your country remains unbanked. Although it's 9 million, and still a lot of people, more than the population of Hong Kong. But you know, along with other Central Asian countries, there is a lot of unbanked and uninsured individuals, and that is what's the opportunity that is out there. And really interesting, only in this day and age, is the fact that our friend who is going to present tomorrow, my understanding, is a businessman from Hong Kong, getting Sandbox license #1 in Astana.
Yeah, I don't know about number, but he's getting there.
Yeah, he's well, at least one of the first, and that is the most very interesting thing, and we'll hear from that friend tomorrow. So moving on to Alex. Alex, he is the founder and group CEO of TNG. I don't know if you've noticed that wherever you go around Cyberport, you see TNG, the poster boy, and you know, you guys have done so phenomenally well since your inception in 2013. I think in 2013, I didn't even know this word fintech. So can you tell us how how you started with this? And my understanding is TNG stands for the next generation, and how you kind of started on this journey 5 years ago.
In fact, we started the journey 10 years ago. We've incorporated the company back in 2013, and we finally launched our service back in 2015, November, which is 2 years and 5 months ago. We can count because this period is pretty short. We went through phenomenal growth. We took more than 10 years from the idea to the 8 years to launch stage. And when we launched, we only have 30 people. And in 2.5 years, we have grown to 500 people. Went through a lot of challenges. We started based in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, as you know, is a world financial center. And when it comes to financial technology, is always more conservative. And therefore, the rules are more strict as compared to many other developing countries. So a lot of people ask, why do we start in Hong Kong? Why not we go to Kazakhstan, go to some other developing countries where the regulations is much more easier? We are quite fortunate to say we start in Hong Kong. We started under the very strict rules with our hands and legs tied, with no rooms for making mistakes. And that's why we said Hong Kong is like a Shaolin temple. We train it very well. And now we are allowed to duplicate our expertise and our successful business model across 13 other countries in Southeast Asia region. And for the first year of transaction volume, we achieved about 50 million. Second year, we already achieved 6.1 billion Hong Kong. And this year, Hong Kong alone, we are talking about 20 billion. And Hong Kong is going to constitute about 20% of our overall transaction volume, because we are now seeing many developing countries in Southeast Asia is growing a lot faster. Talk about the experience in Hong Kong. We started with a vision. TNG stands for the next generation. We wanted to provide the next generation of financial inclusions of financial services to the unbanked populations around the world. There are more than 2 billion people, which is almost half of the world's populations, are the unbanked or underbanked. A lot of needs are coming out from there, and yet very few companies actually trying to address the financial services or the financial needs of these unbanked individuals. So we started in Hong Kong, and we look at in Hong Kong, there are close to 1 million people unbanked, working in Hong Kong, living in Hong Kong, out of which the majority are the domestic helpers. So there are close to 400,000 domestic helpers in Hong Kong. They couldn't open a bank account. They had to spend 3 to 5 hours every week lining out, queuing to send the money home, like squeezing the toothpaste. Why do they wait in line and remit money every week? Because their husband cannot be trusted. If you send the money, they will spend it all. So we started from there, and we provide the service. Now we have close to 70% of the domestic helpers market currently using TNG on almost on a daily basis. And as a natural extension, they request us to extend the service to their family members back in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Thailand. So we see that as a natural extension of our services. And all in all, we have a group of people who are very difficult to please, because when they press the button in TNG wallet, they expect the money to be cleared and available for pick-out in 5 minutes. If they don't see the money in 5 minutes, they will start calling. Whereas if you use the traditional banking services, you press the button, it will take 2 to 5 business days. To these unbanked populations, they are more demanding, I must say. And every day is emergency. It is. So, and it's round-the-clock emergency. Unlike the bank, it would, you take their own street time, they have operating hours. Our service now, we have offered more than 1,300 locations in Hong Kong, which is across all the 7-Eleven and Circle K, to provide real-time, round-the-clock cash in, deposit, and cash out service. Not just in Hong Kong, 1,003 locations, but globally 184,000 locations to provide cash in and cash out. Many of you never heard about this service because you don't need us. But to these unbanked populations, it's a big thing. And we have pretty much learned our experience, and we are going through a huge transformation to apply and offer these services to other developing nations, start from Southeast Asia, and the next phase perhaps is Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. Not in London, not in New York, but in more developing countries, more sustainable development.
So Alex, thank you, and that's incredible, the speed at which your company is growing. And as you have experienced that this whole aspect of financial inclusion is a tremendous opportunity for any entrepreneur. Your company's growth really started, the massive explosion in 2016 when you were able to do the cross-border remittances. And that really helped with kind of like financial inclusion and helping people send money back home. So from your perspective, was it a natural thing for you to have connected the this financial inclusion and sustainable development to what you were doing? Or how would you kind of, recommend the next Alex, the next such a successful entrepreneur? How would you recommend them to take a look at this whole area of helping the unbanked and helping the less privileged of this world and tapping into that market?
I guess you have to look at what problems are we solving. And if you look at the well-banked individuals, the traditional banks actually done a very good job, in providing financial services. To offer a better service, to move from good to something better, the switching cost is very high. To convince you to switch is very high cost. Therefore, we look at the believers, the group of people who don't have any other options. And if they don't have any other option, they will queue up in the office to open a bank account or or e-wallet account. And you see the adoption is a lot faster. The customer cost of acquisition is also a lot cheaper. And you don't, by looking at the problems, it's not by selling them the insurance, the wealth management product. You solve the problem, you win their heart by looking at what are the immediate pains you can solve. Not by spending 3 to 5 hours, almost 50% of the holiday time every Sunday, queuing in the Western Union, in other remittance agencies' storefront. That is not the kind of life they want to go through. So can we make it cheaper, help them save time, save money, and have more control, not just in remittance. After we solve the problem in remittance, we solve the problem in bill payments. Because once they send the money back home, the husband never paid the electricity bill, water bill, and school fees. That is another problem. So we look at it and say, okay, why not we give you the control to allow you to take care of your financial obligations of your family back home? And then we solve the second problem. Then we are now moving to the third phase of the financial inclusions, is after 2 years or 10 years contract here in Hong Kong, when they go back, they have nothing left. In fact, they just now the statistics said when they go back, they are going back negative. Gosh, working in overseas for so many years, when they go back, they have nothing left for themselves. So the next thing we wanted to offer is pension, simple pension plan, and also other wealth management to provide them financial education. You cannot immediately jump in and offer them financial education. You have to solve their other key problem first, and then slowly move to provide financial education so that they can progress their life. And the nation can progress as well because of that. So we really believe in helping people, as many people as possible, not focus on how much money we can make, but focus on how many people we can help. And by focusing on that, although the profit margin is very slim, but we are very happy to say in our second year of operation, in the last few months, we started to be positive, profitable on a monthly basis. And that has created tremendous reward back to us. And I tell my team, we continue to focus on solving the problem. The bigger problem we solve, the more financial reward we can get, but we don't focus so much on profit. And that's how we should look at things. And I see a lot of fintech companies, they're talking about AI, the chatbot, and everybody trying to copy each other. They're all trying to solve, to improve the existing financial system from good to something slightly better. And that is going to be a pool or Red Sea that we see here. But you don't find many individuals or companies actually focus on the unbanked, helping the people who really, the one who really in needs. I think I look forward to see more entrepreneurs to come out with a platform, not to serve the World Bank, but to solve the unbanked and make the world a lot more progressive and better.
Well, Alex, I applaud you for your efforts, and absolutely, I think that for us here in this room, I think a lot of us, otherwise we wouldn't be here, with our focus on sustainable development and understanding that what Alex is doing is much needed and there is a huge business case. I think that what is needed from everybody in this room is to convince the people outside of this room, the many who is here in Cyberport and around Hong Kong, the entrepreneurs, that there is huge business opportunities, and there's so much more green field than the Red Sea that you mentioned. So, I think part of our job here is really to spread that message, and if we are fortunate enough to mentor others, to encourage them to do what you're doing. So, Frank, you're the traditional banker on the panel, but you're not you work for a traditional banking company, but you yourself is not a traditional banker. And my understanding is that you have been involved in fintech in different capacities for many years. And you see Hong Kong playing a pivotal role in the development of fintech. Can you tell us more about what you're thinking and your previous endeavors?
Thank you very much. Unlike Mr. Fang, he was a banker and becomes an entrepreneur. And I was a technologist all my life, with the exceptions for the last few months, when I first joined the bank. So I become a banker now. In my previous jobs, so I've been all over the places, in US, in Hong Kong, and back to US again, and working in different areas of technologies, mostly in optical area, right? So in 2014, when the Hong Kong government asked me to come back to Hong Kong and run ASTRI, which is the Applied Science and Technology Research Institute, the largest R&D organization in Hong Kong, funded by the government. So I was very delighted and took up the challenge, right? So when I look at the whole situation in Hong Kong 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, I realized that Hong Kong has a really important advantage. Hong Kong is a financial center. Hong Kong is an international financial center for the entire China, and this status will not go away. I see that is very important. We have almost all the important elements of the infrastructure within in this place. We have the very tightly, as Alex talked about, we have very good regulatory bodies, very well laws and regulations, and then we have the institutions. We have financial institutions, internationals and local, big and small. We have, if you look at the Hong Kong GDP compositions, almost 80-some%, or maybe even or that range, and is coming from a service industry, and a substantial part is coming related to finance. Finance, logistics. Look at that number; it's really huge. So actually, in a way, Hong Kong is backed by finance, logistics, whatever, tourism, the service industries. So I see that we have all the elements, and we have very good schools and so on. So I think Hong Kong is very suitable. Since Hong Kong is also a financial center, so Hong Kong is very well suited to become the financial center. So financial technology center. So 3.5 years ago, so when I first joined the institute, I chart out this is one of the biggest area, one of the big thrusts, we have to push. So I did 3 things. Number one, I built a lot of infrastructure. So meaning that, and then I would build programs and I build projects, right? So projects is easy to understand. So we work on different areas. We recruit a whole bunch of people on cybersecurity. You look at fintech with whatever the technologies that is related to financial institutions, right? So that means there's a cybersecurity, there is a big data analytics, there's a blockchains, that Mr. Fang talks about. And we also have all the biometrics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, so everything, along that we need with that particular technologies. And to stimulate the growth, we also build programs. For example, we work closely with Hong Kong MA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and we work closely with the police department, so on cybersecurity. So we do build a lot of programs, training programs, and information sharing program. And even for the talent, for the university, we do that. So it was kind of successful. So we have been doing quite a few things, within, within the particular 3 years. So I'm hoping, since I left the company, so I'm hoping that this will continue. So in infrastructure-wise, so we built all kinds of labs, so that is relevant to the technology growth. So we have the cybersecurity lab with the blockchain lab. We have the big data analytics lab. So, those are still there. So another thing I think I can say I'm very proud to say that there are a few companies spun off from the company when I was with the institute. So some of those have become very successful. It became on the way to become success. Hopefully as big as TNG and even Chongqing. So this is what my past life is. So this is my belief. Hong Kong should develop the financial technologies, the fintech, that is well built, with the infrastructures, with systems right here. So we can do a lot, not only for Hong Kong, but for the Greater Bay Area, and also for even the entire mainland China. Hong Kong will remain as the international financial center. It also serves as a bridge to the outside world.
Thank you. And with all your vast experience and joining HSBC 6 months ago, what are some of the things that HSBC is doing in the area of fintech and also in the area of sustainable development?
Let me say something about sustainable development first, right? So I brought along this book, which is published by KPMG, right? So I brought FinTech, a Game Changer. If you please turn on to page 11. So they say that HSBC Sustainable Bond. So this is coming from our company, and I'm very proud to say that 2017 we set up a bond of about $1 billion in size, right? So on sustainable activities, right? And then we also pledged by 2025, these numbers goes to $100 billion. So I was told by you that we are the only local bank doing such a noble act, So we contribute, substantially to the sustainable activities. Now, as for myself, I joined the bank, and I'm the global head of innovations and strategic investment. In fact, I have a couple jobs. One of the jobs is I'm looking at the applied innovation across the globe. HSBC has close to 70 countries and 250,000 people worldwide. So we are really, really big bank, and we have probably a huge geographic coverage. I hope we have. I don't know whether we have in Kazakhstan, so certainly we have lots of coverage, right? So there are a lot of activities. We are looking at innovations, and we are also looking at the bringing new technologies to the bank. So I'm looking at that particular area, which is applied innovations. Now, similar to that, I'm also in charge of the strategic investment. Now, what is that? This is basically a corporate venture, meaning that the bank put aside some money, and we would like to look at the startup companies, and we want to invest these particular companies with the aim to bring the technology to the bank. So, so this is something that just like Intel Capital, like Tencent, Alibaba, many other companies, they have a venture arm. So I'm in charge of that particular business unit, just to take care of different fintech companies around the world, and we want to invest in over there, and hopefully bring the technology to the bank. That's the main goal.
Do you think that you will put more emphasis on kind of like, are these fintech companies that you would like to invest in, or vetting whether they are, focusing on sustainable development or financial inclusion, et cetera, et cetera?
Right now, we are more or less focused on technologies. So if you look at technologies we have that is fit to the bank, we have areas like big data analytics, machine learning, even video conferencing, communication technologies, blockchain, cybersecurity, all over the place, right? So the main goal is there's always a gap between the traditional banks and also fintechs. The gap is because for all these years and because of all the regulations and everything, a bank is built a very complicated system. So it's very difficult for any startup companies to understand and to disrupt their entire system. So we are working closely with the startup companies. We collaborate. And hopefully, in that particular mode, we bring the technologies, bring to the bank and speed up the innovations process and help us to do better. Serving simple, our services to our pledge to the customers will be simpler, faster, and better. That's probably the mode of operation we have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Frank. So one final question before we move on to questions from the floor. I think one of the areas that may be a concern is in the area of financial literacy. And I'm just throwing this out to any of the panelists. With fintech giving the availability of all of these financial services that many of the citizens in these developing countries have never had, all of a sudden having all of this stuff. Financial literacy must be a concern. And how do you think, as a business, or as businesses, as regulators, etc., as forerunners, how can we help upscale that with your influence? So I don't know if anybody wants to answer that question.
Maybe more direct to me or related to me. We, through our past experience, we find that to serve, to educate the unbanked, you cannot apply your own standard. You have to really understand their needs. For people in this room, you will download the app yourself. You will explore the app yourself. Yeah. But when it comes to the unbanked, the experience is they will come to our office. We tell them you can conduct online KYC. You don't need to come to our office. But they still queue out in our office. They want to see us, see the real people behind. And when they come to our office, they will pass us their mobile phone and say, do anything you need to do with it. Yeah? And we have to provide the people to serve them, to help them to download, help them to install, help them to register. And in 5 seconds after registration, they already forgotten their login ID and password. Seriously. And we had to print the small card and ask them to write it down and make sure there's insert into their wallet, their real wallet, and ask them to keep it safe, right? And a lot of time I see in the conferences, people say, oh, we developed this AI, we developed this chatbot, we developed all this wonderful technology to help the unbanked. I said, gosh, you are missing the point. You really need to, before you develop something wonderful, it's not about technology, it's about people. Whether you are really helping and understand their culture or not. And we invest a lot of that. And in terms of the user experience, in terms of educating them. So we have done the first part of our education. We have a leader group. Every time we deploy something, we always invite a group of people to work hand in hand with us before we develop the new service. And at the same time, we are now moving to the next phase. We are training the leaders and let the leaders to train their fellow friends. We cannot do everything ourselves. And we don't want to spend money in advertising, in TV ads, because they don't watch TV. They don't read newspaper. So how are we going to reach out to them? And what we found out is whenever we print something, they don't read. And they only trust their own people. So if the people, their friends say good, then it must be good. And they would like people to guide them. And we are not in the position to do everything for them. Therefore, we are now in the process guiding, training the first adopter, and then get the first adopter to train their fellow members and friends. So this is our experience in terms of providing financial education. So the first phase, get the first group of people on board, solve the immediate financial problems. Once we solve their initial financial problems, then they only have time and room to think about their financial security, about their wealth, about their pension, about their insurance protection, so on and so forth. It got to go through the process. And we learned from that, when we launch our services in other developing countries, we always launch something simple first. We don't want to launch a full bell and whistle, because they won't get it. It's too much. Sometimes less means more. We have to give them step by step, bit by bit, so that we don't confuse them. So that's our approach.
I don't think it's only not confusing somebody like me as well. With all of these developments, it's very difficult to keep up as well. I think even for us here in very well banked places, with these development of apps and fintech, it is not easy to keep up. And I think that we have to keep that human element in all the stuff that we do, rather than just purely focusing on the technology.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, people argue whether it is fintech or techfin. whether it's finance come first before technology or technology come first before finance. In our organization, we don't believe both. We believe in people should come first. The user should come first before the technology, before the finance. You can have technology orgasm. People talk about blockchain, talk about this and that. They say, oh, wonderful. But to them, is it relevant? They can't even feed their family. Is it really relevant that you are using blockchain or not? I mean, it serves your purpose, but maybe serve your purpose when it comes to fundraising by telling your investor that you are in blockchain. But to your real customer, the real user, that is not important. And we have to focus on what is important.
Frank, you had something to say?
In terms of the educations, well, it's slightly related to this area. So the bank has a scholarship program, especially in Hong Kong. We also run a hackathon. So with the young people can join in and compete and also learn along the same way about the financial technologies and also related to financial areas. So this would be related to what you have raised.
Mr. Frank?
To move the user from online, the experience is no different from Alex. But I wouldn't repeat the key points Alex have highlighted. I will share with the audience. I have many subsidiaries working within the group. So as a group chief executive, what are the guiding principles I'm giving to my chief executive and chairmen of subsidiaries? 4 basic principles I've observed. The first principle is I keep emphasizing in all my key meetings, reputation is key to the service and the products that we are offering in the internet, in the cyberspace. Reputation is key, so don't do anything that potentially can overnight destroy the brand that you are building. Point number 1. Point number 2, the service and the products that we are offering to the clients have to be addressing the pain points of the clients today. Exactly what Alex have been explaining. So second principle is you need to know the products and the service that you're offering. How is it helping the client, the target client group, how to address their pain points? Only then the clients will come back for a second time and third time and fourth time. Then your proposition becomes sustainable. The third principle is in offering any financial services, there will be risks involved. And one of the key emphasis that I have is, do we have the right process, the right people to manage the risk that is involved? Third principle. I didn't put the risk as a second principle. Primarily, if you're not solving the client's problem, then why are you talking about addressing the risk? Let's understand the problems which we are addressing. There'll be risks. How are we addressing the risk? Do we have the process? Do we have the people monitoring them? Only when the first three principles are observed, then we get down to talk about how the business model works and how do we make money out from the whole process. Now, these have worked well for us, touch wood, till today. And I think from a company angle, that discipline, I think, is important and essential as the group scale up and grow with new staff. Thank you.
Yeah, from the regulatory perspective, of course, things have to be changed as well in terms of increasing literacy. So consumer protection should be very important cornerstone for the regulator to tackle the situation with the fintech. Again, the regulators have to change the behavior, attitude, and they have to be people-centric, consumer-centric, not bank-centric, not the technology-centric, not something else, not the process-centric. Important to help people to be involved, we understand there will be pain, but to try to reduce the pain and try to explain the consumer what to expect. And this should be happening on every level in the schools, in the beginning. It should be for the elder population who were not supposed to, who were not very much adopted before to technology. So it should be on every particular area. And importantly, also regulators have to do the data protection. We're talking about personal, talk about digital ID or digital bank account or whatever digital account you have. And again, regulators have to step into the arena and show the rule of the game, how the data, personal data, is protected, and what kind of risk of every consumer have to take on the providing his personal data to enabler, to the fintech services provider.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the panelists. I think we have around 10 minutes for Q&A from the floor. And may I now open up the floor to see if there are any questions that you may have to the panelists? Yes, over here.
First of all, I must give a thanks to all of you. It's a new thing, but quite exciting. I was not in a bank, neither was in the financial institution. I'm in the industries, textile industry. But it makes me very inquisitive and quite interesting, you know, because especially this kind of thing might be work country like Bangladesh, where I belongs to, where there are a lot of idle money is around there, you know, but neither they are going to the banks, neither they feel secure. Even they don't feel secure to keep it on the bank even. Sometimes it happens, you know. So do you think that this kind of fintech can be workable in Bangladesh, or would it be interested to come forward to start doing business in the country like us? And what kind of regulations you need to have from the government side?
Actually, what I was thinking about Bangladesh, with a population of over 80 million people. 160, sorry, I might beg your pardon. It's a great place to launch an equivalent of a Yuepao, and either with a big brand that all the entire population of the society trusts, with or without government involvement, but you need a brand. I can bring in the technology, or some of the other colleagues can bring in the technology, and it could help. It could help because when we look at the description which Pat earlier described, Yuepao is using a mobile phone technology with what Alex was describing, using the existing chain, non-banks counter, 24-hour services, to be able to gather the deposits and to disperse the money, using just existing infrastructure in place. The technology solution will be able to help to assemble, okay, the funds otherwise will be either kept in a tin can or under the pillow or under the bed, okay? And then that would help to reduce the cash flow. At the same time, the people can withdraw money as and when they need. Now, the money that's assembled will be placed in a money market fund. For some of you who are less familiar, a money market fund means the money will be deployed only to the banks, deposited into the banks, either on an overnight, 1 week, 1 month, 3 months basis. And the interest that is gathered will then be economically distributed back to the consumer, okay? Otherwise, this money will be not making any interest or making minimum current account interest, whereas in this case, you could be making 10 to 15 times more than the average current account interest. So happy to take on that challenge, but today, within my board, my focus, and I've been telling the board, our focus is the main dominant Asia first, and South Asia. I need a partner to bring me there, and then I will go there with the partner to help to grow the business. That's some of the thoughts, Alex.
A quick one. We're already in Bangladesh. We already covered more than all the banks that we can send money in and out of the banks, and also more than 37,000 cash in, cash out location through GCash. So it's every street, basically, you are accessible. And there are many companies are talking to us to do a mass salary payout because people there don't have a bank account. So, and you don't want to carry a truckload of cash to pay them in cash. It's also very risky. So a lot of companies wanted to use our service for corporate mass payout services, especially when it comes to salary payouts. So Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, all these are important market to us that we can really create tremendous value to those people there.
Okay. Question here and then a question over there. Yeah.
Thank you. Congratulations, all of you. It was really stimulating. Alex, congratulations to you. Inspiring story. I'm especially because you're thinking of the future where you are insuring insurance plus also you're thinking of pension. And are you working with an insurance company or will you be doing it yourself, your company? And the pension, if you can touch how you will insure the pensions. Thank you.
Let's talk about the pension. We wanted to make it a month for them to set a goal. Let's say if they're going to work in Hong Kong or in Dubai for 2 years, and they said by the time I go home, I want to have, say, 10,000 savings or 20,000 savings. Immediately, our program in the e-wallet was said, then if so, your monthly contribution is this much. Are you agreeable? If they're agreeable, then press the authorization. Every month, we will do an automatic deduction from their e-wallet and goes into the pension account. Now, when it comes to the pension, it doesn't need to be, because these are unbanked individuals. For those unbanked, if the income level is less than 1,000 US a month, you can actually, they can actually do it self-declare as a self-employed individuals and set out multiple numbers of pension account. So they can set out one pension account for their own personal purpose, second account for their holiday, for their wedding, so they can set up multiple accounts. Unlike the well-banked individual in this room, that your income level is more than 1,000 US, you need the employer certification. So it's actually more troublesome. And you usually have to go through the MPF, the company will have to do the filing through the regulatory and so on, make it compulsory. But if your income level is less than 1,000 US a month, there is a separate treatment altogether. I can go into more details. And what I can say and share here is that there are tremendous blue ocean opportunities that most people overlook. And that is a pretty good market that for companies like us to go in.
Okay, the question over there, that lady.
First of all, thank you all for the very inspiring panel chats. I guess my question is more to Frank, to be honest. So I actually got 2 questions for you. So I'm quite interested in the corporate investment, in-house venture that you mentioned just now. So can you share a little bit more, what would be the difference in terms of investment philosophy or focus when comparing to technology company like Tencent that you mentioned in terms of investing into fintech companies? And secondly, so I actually remember you mentioned that many startups nowadays they're not actually that knowledgeable in terms of the traditional banking of how the procedure is working. So do you have any advices for these startups I guess some of the participants here are actually startups based in Cyberport, I guess. So do you have any advices for them that how they can actually overcome this situation and maybe go straight to the point? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Right. So the first question is basically the environment or the culture between the difference between the bank and also a traditional technology companies, I think. And the other one is what is the advice I could give to startup companies, given the environments are very different. So first of all, the bank is a bank. Bank is not a technology company, right? So why should I say that? Yeah, because if you look at a technology company, a substantial or fixed amount of money, of the top line of your budget goes to R&D. So this is the typical case. Now, and then they have typically for a technology company, you have a large IP department. You really need to protect your IP, and you talk about licensing, or maybe you're filing lawsuit against other people if your IP are being infringed, right? So bank is, in a way, we're adopting the new technologies. So we are not in a way of selling, or maybe we are licensing our technologies to other companies. So there's one major difference. So because of that environment, so you can imagine a technology company and a traditional banking industries are very different. And also given the fact that the banking industries are pretty conservative industry, right? So actually is really great opportunity and great occasion. You see that almost all the banks are embracing transformations. We talk about transformations, talk about innovations. This is a really new, this is really new era that we are stepping into. So this is, and also we're embracing, all these changes we are seeing. So it's number one. The second one, you talk about how could I advise the startup companies in terms of the banking industries and also the startup. We do help a lot of startup companies, in different capacities. For example, if the startup companies, at different phases, the startup companies coming from the angel round, a few people, and then you come to A round, B round, C round, D round, and so on, and then you go IPO. The bank, in my positions, we are helping the companies, these startup companies, to bring the technologies that they can integrate with the bank. So we have that. We benefit. We both sides benefit. Both you can. When we invest in the companies, we usually bring the startup companies to become the supplier to the bank. So at the same time, you enjoy working with the bank, and you provide, you supply to the bank. Meanwhile, we also enjoy having your technologies, and we can integrate with the bank. A couple requirements, So if we look at the bank as the size we have, we are looking at any technologies that cannot be restricted to one particular region, because once we bring your technology in, we want to go global. Because as I said, we have almost 70 countries around the world. So this is the global aspect of the technology is very, very important. And then we want to drive, and once we bring you guys in, we want to drive across the entire globe. So this is an important aspect. So in a way, we work together. We want to work closely with all the startup companies in the fintech area. That is very relevant to the bank's future. So we see you are the future for us. We see you bring in the transformation, you bring the innovations. As I said about the culture, the differences, and so on. So actually, we are very, very much happy to work with startup companies.
Well, thank you very much. Apologies, that's the end of the session. I know that there are some other questions. Do find the panelists at the cocktail afterwards. There is another panel after this, and then afterwards there is a cocktail. But may you join me in thanking the panelists for a really wonderful session.
Thank you for the insightful discussions, and please remain on stage for a group photo. So would all our panelists and Mr. Wu please stand closer together for a group photo. And let's look at the camera in the center. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for all the panelists and Mr. Wu for sharing their experiences and thoughts on the topic. And if you have any questions on the topic, please feel free to reach out to them. So would all our panelists please be seated? Thank you. So moving on, we'll have plenary session 3. All right, now we'll move on to plenary session 3, the Artificial Intelligence Revolution, Implications for Work and Society. And we're very delighted to have Professor Barbara Maynard, Senior Advisor, Phone Group, Chair, ESBN Task Force on Digital Economy, to moderate this session. So please note that again, there won't be a coffee break, but there are self-serving coffee, tea, and drinks at the foyer. So if you need any drinks, please help yourself. So ladies and gentlemen, let's put your hands together to welcome Professor Barbara Maynard to moderate the session.
Okay, please take a seat. Okay. Please take a seat. Plenty of time to catch up during the cocktail and dinner. Please take a seat. I know you had a fantastic session. I really enjoyed that. And plenty of time to catch up. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here to talk about the AI, artificial intelligence, and that so many of you remain, even though this is the last session of the day. So I would start by introducing the panel members. And when I say your name, just raise your hand, yeah. Andy Chun. Andy is Associate Professor, Department of Computer Science at the City University of Hong Kong. The next one is Yam Ki Chan. Yes, he's Head of Public Policy and Government Affairs, Hong Kong and Southeast Asia Frontier from Google. The Scott Likens, Emerging Technology Lead, US and China from PwC. And Chris Kai, Managing Partner from Transip. So we have a very interesting cross-section of experts on AI from different disciplines. I just like to make some observations about AI. Some of you may be experts out there, some of you may be new. But what most of us learn about AI is from what we see in the movies, you know, the Terminator and such things. I just want to say that AI is not the same as a robot. The AI is the computer software, is the intelligence. The robot is a container. And we tend to make the robot, the container, look like a human because that's what we are familiar with. That's what our brain can handle. But the AI doesn't need to have a container. And you experience that every day with Siri. That's an AI. The Siri in your iPhone, for those of you who use iPhones, there are other similar system in your other iPhones. So that's the first observation. The second observation is that, you know, there are different calibers of AI. And we have been using AI for ages. I mean, the Google search is AI. The email spam filter, that's AI. And these are simple things. You know, when you drive a car, a brand new car with sophisticated equipment, a lot of that is AI, and many of them now help you to park. But there are different calibers of AI. Where we are in this stage of development is what is called artificial narrow intelligence. What it is that it's very smart, but it's smart in specific areas. It's smart in verticals. It's not yet as intelligent as us human beings. Now, some of my panel members may disagree, some may agree, but a day may come when it's as intelligent as us. Then it will change its name to a different caliber called artificial general intelligence. The, you know, we had planned on how we were going to present this, and each of the speakers was going to give a speech. And then we sat down, and within 2 minutes, we're saying, let's just have a discussion, because the topic is too exciting, too new, and everybody would be interested to hear we hope everybody is interested to hear what we all have to say. And we are sure that many of you have questions from the floor, and then we would like to have a conversation with you as well. So we've changed the format into a conversation. And I will start by asking a question, the same question to all the panel members, and it's a general question. In Davos this year, in January, the Google CEO made a statement that AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. AI is more profound than fire or electricity. And I'd like to ask our panelists what they think of that. I'm going to put Kim Chan on the spot because he works for Google. And what do you think of that? And just
no pressure.
No pressure.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I think it's actually quite important that I'm a local Hong Konger to see such high caliber group here. I think the government's doing a great job in terms of bringing these sort of forums, talking about innovation and technology, and I just want to shout out to the government for taking the effort to do that, because this is not easy, and to all the panelists that have come and traveled here. I think Professor's comment was really, really on point, and you'd be a great spokesperson on artificial intelligence, because I think there is a lot of misconception around specifically general AI, and then more specific ones in certain areas. And in particular, I think some of the progress has been made around imaging, speech recognition, and those narrow sort of fields. I think, to Sundar's point, we are, I think, at an important time in history where we're seeing the benefits of AI to broader society. And to tie this into the SDGs, we think that the benefits of artificial intelligence, much like the internet and some of the greatest technology, is actually going to accrue to everyone. And it's going to help us solve messy problems that are actually critical to ending poverty and meeting some of the SDG goals. In particular, I want to just touch on 3 areas. One is, the first one being healthcare and biology, where we're seeing the use of AI to help diagnose diabetic retinopathy, which affects 415 million people around the world, to help detect this preventable blindness in the eye, and in particular, helping people who do not have access to doctors to diagnose this problem. And other areas that are being done around skin cancer, predictive stroke prediction, as well as other parts of healthcare. I think that's going to be one key area. The second one is going to be around environment and agriculture. We're seeing, for example, in Los Angeles, where a group of students are taking old cell phones and installing solar panels to them to help power them. And they're actually going to be implementing these in the forest of Peru, Brazil, and Indonesia to recognize the sound of chainsaws to prevent deforestation, right? To be able to take out that sound in the midst of the sounds of birds and rivers and normal tree falling. That's quite important. There's also the AI that's being used now for cell phones to recognize diseases in cassava plants. And as those of you who've lived in the developing world, cassava is actually a major food source for people around the world. and be able to to find diseases early on and to treat them will help solve the question for food and food security. And then lastly, accessibility. We at YouTube are using machine learning to caption 1 billion hours of videos in 10 languages, which will make educational videos accessible to people who, the 300 million plus people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So through these technologies, we're actually going to find ways to improve the conditions of certain groups that wasn't possible before. And I think we are ambitious in trying to solve, to eliminate poverty and to address the SDGs. AI is going to be part of that toolkit, and we need to really think seriously about that.
Chris?
Well, that was a great start, so thank you. No, I look at things a little bit differently. I look at it from, I guess, from an investor standpoint and from an entrepreneur standpoint. And probably the best line that I've heard recently is that AI is not a part of the future of technology. AI is the future. And it's basically utilizing a vast array of technologies to understand more and more about our communities, how we live, how we do things, whatever that may be. I look at it from a standpoint of an investment. How is it changing? Where is that value? I think we talked a lot about earlier today, even as I was listening to some of the panelists in talking about the social impact of investing. But you know, I'm a Silicon Valley guy by heart, and that's where I've spent the last 27 years building, growing technology companies, investing in them. And we used to have this saying that we're not building companies to grow value and grow valuations and to make money. We're building companies to change the world. And I think that's kind of what AI is now doing. I think we had a lull over the last 10 to 15 years in technology and technology growth. I think that AI now is having such a wide impact that the efforts that companies are making in AI, to your point, is that it's changing the world. Whether it's medicine, it's healthcare, we're talking about automotive. AI in automotive, for example, started out not to park your car, but to save lives and to look at from a standpoint of distracted driving, drowsy driving, whatever it may be. The number of collisions and crashes and mortality rates are going up faster than ever before in the automotive space. So we're starting to utilize technology. And one point that I want to make, and then I'll hand it off, is that we are talking about AI, but AI encompasses a lot more than just artificial intelligence. There's the outer layer is artificial intelligence. The next layer down is deep learning, and then machine learning, and then we get down to neural networks. And so AI right now, we're at a point where we are grabbing as much data as we fundamentally can. Then the deep learning starts, then the machine learning starts, and then we start training neural networks. And so really what we're only touching the surface right now. And I think when we talked earlier, we talked about the amount of money being invested in companies. In the last 2 years, there were only 300 companies that really got venture funding in the last 2 years. That's out of 20,000 companies a year that get venture funding. We haven't even really scratched the surface. But just in the last 2 days alone, Microsoft made a pledge of $5 billion in AI over the next 4 years. And SenseTime just raised $600 million, for example. But I think we're just on the cusp right now, investment and the opportunity and what can actually be done with AI. And so I agree wholeheartedly with that, with the quote. In a long, roundabout way, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, great. So I'm gonna attack it maybe from two lenses. So PwC as a firm has a mission statement to solve complex problems and build trust in society, which I truly believe in. And I think to some of the things you're talking about, what Google's after is really to help the world. We've seen this, as you mentioned, the maturity of AI in the last few years. So I worked on the first internet browser in '94, and I saw the internet kind of come alive. But that was over 10 or 15 or 20 years. I wrote AI code 25 plus years ago, and we'll hear from a professor that's been doing it 30. It didn't scare me until about 2 years ago. And I say scare me in the sense of how fast it's been moving. And I think being in China for the last 5 years, I came in the middle of the Internet Plus focus of China, and it was building, these amazing tech companies, which, inherently created a platform of data for AI to thrive upon. Now, the current Chinese 5-year plan is really focused on building out AI next. And I think what that means is there's a huge, amount of money, but a huge passion around this investment, and it's moving so quick. So the lens of PwC, we see workforces changing drastically. And especially here in Asia, workforces in the hundreds of thousands doing jobs that AI will quite honestly do, I think, in the near future. And I know 2030 is the date we have on some of these targets, but I don't think it's that far off. And I worry that we as a species have to really adapt quickly. So again, the internet was amazing, and it created this whole new economy, but over 10 or 20 years, AI now is creating this in 2 or 3 or 5 years. So we look at the workforce of the future and what we as people are going to do. How do we adapt to that so quickly? I get a little excited and a little worried. And as I advise clients, just trying to understand the skills of students, and we'll hear about, how do you learn differently? How AI is changing everything. But to your point, it's more than just AI. I'm looking at the advancement of technologies, things like the sensors and the Internet of Things that start to feed AI. My favorite topic is blockchain, and I'll talk about that later today around smart cities, but the capture and understanding what's happening in the physical world now being digitized and available for AI. I think there's amazing opportunities to solve, as you mentioned, healthcare, to solve simple things like traffic. We still haven't solved that. But as a workforce, we have to adjust, and we have to adjust fast. So at PwC, we know accounting's going away. The Economist published a pretty high percentage, 94% chance. That's pretty high that accountants won't be here in 20 years. I don't think it's 20 years from now. So we as a firm have to completely change our business. What does assurance mean in the world of artificial intelligence? What does advice mean in the world of artificial intelligence? We have 240,000 people that we have to think about. And now you extrapolate that to countries that have to understand what to do next. Jack Ma has a great quote that says the best CEO in 30 years could be a robot. Now, maybe not physical robot, but you have people like that thinking about it. So the other lens is should we worry about it beyond just the workforce? And I think I side with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk has been very public about his fears, and he's putting money behind fixing that problem. And so we as a firm have really stood behind having a responsible AI framework, working with governments to say, how do we get ahead of this now and put up what I'd call guardrails? We want the optimization, we want the automation, we want the good side of what AI brings. But the advancement, the speed of advancement worries me and many others if we don't put those guardrails in place. So you mentioned Terminator. I don't think that Skynet is necessarily a few years out. But with the connection of physical devices, embodied AI, so the robots, and superintelligence, or the ability to understand mass amounts of data at speeds which we as humans can't understand, all of that together starts to create an environment that I worry about. So being responsible for that now, creating unbiased artificial intelligence. We as humans are always biased, but we can create unbiased artificial intelligence if we do it right, if we do it now. So I think we're focused on the workforce of the future. How do we not only evolve our own workforce, but the incoming workforce, the Gen Z who thrive in this world of data and AI, and then putting the guardrails around it and creating this responsible environment to take advantage of the AI. So I do think it's one of, if not the most important thing we're working on. We've been working on it for 50 or 60 years, depending on what you look at from an AI perspective. I think the last 5 and the next 5 are the most important.
Andy?
Well, just to follow up, I'd like to talk about the SDGs for United Nations. But before that, I want to follow up with some of the things that you mentioned about people getting ready for the future with AI and jobs potentially getting displaced. One of the questions that I get from a lot of my colleagues is that will our jobs, professors' jobs, get replaced in the near future? And believe it or not, some people think that it might happen very soon. So if it does happen, it might be good because we could be reaching.
Can retire.
Well, we could retire, and we'll reach the United Nations SDG goal number 4, which is quality education for everybody in the world. So for those, I guess everyone's familiar, but I got some statistics. But goal number 4 is the belief that education is a fundamental right for mankind. And the specific goal is that by the year 2030, all girls and boys will get equal, fair, and free primary and secondary education. And for tertiary education, it will be at an affordable rate. Now, I just want to share some statistics. Now, first of all, quality education is important because it's an enabler for many of the other SDGs. With education, with knowledge, we bring in equality. People will be better understanding of each other. There'll be more job opportunity. Health and well-being will be in place. But the problem challenges of reaching that goal is that, according to some statistics, is that we are very short of teachers. In fact, within, let me just get this correct. In fact, there's currently about 263 million children and youth that are out of school. Out of that, 25 million are children in primary school age, people who have never set foot in a school before. For reaching the 2030 goal, countries must recruit close to 70 million more teachers. That's a lot of teachers. And that's just primary, secondary, and tertiary education. So it's evident that we need something that's very drastic, a major change in the education system. So growing the education system organically, as we have been doing now, educating more teachers, training more teachers, getting students in the classroom, might not work. So we need something that is a seismic level change in terms of how we teach. And potentially a lot of people think that maybe technology plus AI can be that seismic change. Now, what could technology bring? Well, first of all, as you could probably know, is that education itself has been changing a lot, especially in the higher education level. We have more and more online courses. There's these massively open online courses where students, as long as you have an internet connectivity, anybody in the world could take these courses, and very often they're free. Now, potentially, and then there's also courses for secondary school as well. So potentially, leveraging technology, just internet itself before AI, we could bring a lot of content to a lot of students in a very quick way. Now, that is cost-effective, accessible knowledge. But what we're talking about is quality education, and that's where AI comes in. AI, using technologies like big data, could analyze individual needs of students, personalize their learning experience, and be able to adapt learning experience based on student needs in a pace that is suitable to student interests. So I believe that with technology combined with AI, we will most likely reach the 2030 goal for quality education. In fact, some of our colleagues have envisioned that, in particularly Sir Anthony Sheldon earlier last month, some of you probably might have heard, he is the Vice Chancellor of University of Birmingham and the former Master of Wellington College in UK. And he wrote this book called The Fourth Education Revolution, where he envisioned that in the future, before the year 2030, most of the teaching will be done by AI. There will still be humans, but the humans are there just to manage the process. where most of the knowledge would be conveyed by AI. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but there is a chance, and there's a very likely chance. So I'm very optimistic. If we leverage AI technology, potentially, us professors could all retire. Huh?
Can I ask maybe Chris to say something about the loss of jobs that you brought up? Because you know, everywhere you go is you see the headlines, will robots take over my job? Okay, robots, AI, algorithm, automation, whatever term you use. And if yes, if the jobs replacement, and I think, Andy, you're just saying maybe by 2030, there won't be teachers. They will have, you know, it all will be done mainly by AI. And if there are job losses in other sectors and industries, what's going to happen to us? So, Chris, maybe you could.
I think it was Scott, but so I'll let him.
You're Scott, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. He has the 270,000 employees.
240.
240.
I mean, there's no doubt that some jobs will be lost. And again, you know, 95% chance accounting jobs will change. But I think we've seen that throughout history. And I think, I don't know the exact statistic, but in 1905, something like 95 or 96% of people were farmers. And obviously today that's like 1%. So jobs have changed over time. Now what I worry about is the pace of that change, how fast it's changing. I work with, you know, a lot of businesses across a lot of sectors. And the reality is there's process automation happening. It's been happening. There was first process, you know, offshoring, and we put the jobs somewhere else. Now we're bringing the jobs back, and we're using robotics to do them, automation to do them. What we're finding is, you know, there's an optimization there of the business that is inherently valuable. If we can replace those people into new jobs. I have one client that said, if you automate your job, I'll promote you, right? So to incent his employees. So I think there's no doubt jobs will go away. I think there's going to be new jobs that emerge. You know, you think about the amount of data scientists we need. Now, not everyone can be a data scientist, but I think there's a large Chinese SOE insurance company that quotes they have now 15,000 data scientists, up from 2,000 5 years or 3 years ago. So you know, these are jobs that didn't exist. So we have an opportunity I think we as a human species are always evolving the things we do. So the short answer is yes, jobs will go away, but new jobs will emerge. As we studied it, by 2030, we think there's an additional 15 trillion in GDP related just to AI. Most think that's around the automation part, but it's actually the way we've calculated, but only about half. The other half is all around consumption and the ability for consumers to consume more, and you know, and that makes up that other, you know, about half of that 15 trillion. And half of that 15 trillion, 7 trillion is in China alone. So we know that already has created new jobs. China has moved out of the manufacturing into the services, you know, industries quite aggressively. So all of those workers have kind of reskilled. So I think that's our view, is there's a reskilling. Now, some people could be left behind, and I think that's where we have to really focus. In emerging markets, in markets that are very manually labor-based, we have to get ahead of that. Again, that responsible sense of what we automate and how we automate, and how we bring the workers along through that. I think there's some really different approaches. You've got some European countries offering minimum, you know, a living income, so that may or may not work. You've got other countries approaching it different ways. I think we have to accept the fact that manual jobs will go away, but they have already throughout the 1900s into the 2000s, and we've adapted. So let's keep adapting. But it's that time series that I worry. Can we adapt fast enough? And we need to focus on that. We need to invest in that.
Sure.
Can I add something on that? Just, you know, I think there are going to be I won't even say job losses. I think there's going to be a lot of job changes. I think that's the point. But I look at it from a standpoint of, and we were talking a little bit about this before the talk. If you look at the autonomous world, I'm going to go back to automotive here because I know some real good data here. But you look at the number of miles that Baidu, Google, and others are talking about collecting to create a truly autonomous vehicle. They're talking about collecting by the end of next year 200 million or 300 million miles and whatnot. But you need 5 billion miles of road data to be able to actually create an autonomous vehicle and implement that type of a system. Now, why am I making this point? I'm making this point because that data and information that gets collected, it's raw data. It's not contextual rich data that needs to be transferred over. So you need to collect probably a multiple of that. For every stop sign, you need to create and capture 4,000 images of that stop sign to continue to train the neural network and train the system. Now, what kind of a job gets created? Well, there's companies all over the world that are tagging data and information and every image. And so these are different types of jobs, and they're raising the level of pay in different areas around the world. Now, in the United States, we're not paying people to tag images and whatnot, but in other parts of the world, we're doing that. And so you start to think about automotive and healthcare and other areas where we're utilizing AI. We need all of that data and information captured and tagged, and that starts to create a whole nother level. You brought up a conversation about a company in China that says now they have 15,000 data scientists. Every company that I invest in or I'm around or anything, we're trying to hire data scientists. And you go to one company and now all of a sudden I swear every other person in that company, and they have 200,000 employees, is a data scientist. Because now those companies are starting to understand that they're going to get valued in the public markets based on the number of data scientists they have, based on the use of AI. We talk about travel, and we can talk about let's talk about a company like a Tunio or a C-Trip or anything along those lines. There's comparisons of having a 16x multiple by utilizing AI and data in the travel and in the services business versus not using it. And you can start to see that why people are throwing money at these things and all of these efforts. Because if I can get a 16x valuation on my revenue, or it's a 16x revenue, not even times earnings, I'm going to start looking at how I'm going to use the data. How am I going to use analytical data? How am I going to tag this information? And then how am I going to get scary smart about how you travel, where you travel, and what you're using to book your travel? So all these different little things. So my point is that, yes, there's going to be job losses, but the amount of jobs that are going to be picked up by having data and the need for data scientists or the use of that data and people being able to understand it is going to change. Maybe all the accountants will take that job. I'm not sure. But that's what we're going to need.
I'm not an accountant.
That's right.
Yankee?
I think a lot of great points have been raised. I'll touch on a couple of things. First, going back to the time with the SDGs and examples that we talked about around using AI to detect diabetes and to find diseases in cassava plants. I think we have yet to understand just the amount of human potential that have been lost or wasted because of resource constraints. And resource constraint not just in the food, but also just time waiting to see the doctor. Where when you have AI that are able to help solve some of those problems, it's going to make doctors more productive, meaning they are able to see more clients, more patients. It also means that the patients will no longer be waiting in line. They're actually going to be working. They're going to be creating the next thing, whatever that may be. They could be actually going back to their small business and supporting their family. They don't necessarily have to be canvassing plants to repair them because they have solved that problem earlier on. So that's one thing that we're going to think about in terms of maybe more of the emerging markets, what this means in terms of how technology is actually going to empower people to do more because their time are spent on things that are probably more productive than before. Second part is on the training part, and it's something that we are thinking a lot about because the current education system, I would say probably all around the world, are a step behind in terms of where the puck is going, to use a Wayne Gretzky example. And we have done a couple of things on our end. One, we have made the AI library open source. TensorFlow itself is open source. Anyone can use it. And it's actually the #1 downloaded machine learning toolkit library on GitHub. And you don't need to know machine learning. You just need to know some computer science and data structures, and you can actually get going. And we have a farmer in Japan that used TensorFlow, built a machine to help his mother sort cucumbers because the woman was spending a lot of time sorting out different shapes of cucumbers, and now she can spend her time doing something else. The other thing is on training, and we've been doing a lot in terms of coding for kids through CS First. Not so much teach them how to code a particular language, but the idea of problem solving, of how do you take a problem, break it down, and then attack it by pieces, and in ways that can actually be transferable in different type of problem sets. And then we also have tools called Digital Garage that actually provide, actually started in the UK of all places, was to help people that were transitioning careers think about what does the digital economy mean to them, and how do they get up to speed on things around digital marketing, around how to use cloud services, how to do AI. These are things that will help a more mature market, a more developed market, think about that transition and retraining. So we're investing a lot in that. And then lastly, maybe more of a holistic view is, I think in some ways, the way a workplace treats employees needs to change. Because in this conversation, it makes it seem as if human beings are replacement by robots or vice versa, and that's simply not the case. We are much more than that. We're way smarter than that. We're creative, we solve problems, we think laterally, we make connections across different disciplines that the computer has yet to do and will take a while to do. And I think we need to think about, as we structure organizations and businesses, how we're treating our workers and how we are helping our employees create an environment where they are thinking creatively and working across different teams so that they're solving scalable problems that a computer cannot do very well. And then once they figure out, okay, what's the general strategy? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And then apply the computer and the data crunching to it. But this is a challenge, certainly for governments, but also for businesses as well, in terms of how we train and think about the workplace.
You know, what I'm hearing is very encouraging about the AI. And yet, we read that there are people who are very afraid of AI. These are very well-informed, intelligent people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking. And Elon Musk has gone on record again and again that AI is an existential threat to humanity. So perhaps you could comment whether you agree with that or not. And let me start here with Chris.
No, I agree completely with that. As I was saying earlier, it's probably one of my favorite things is to ask what the late, great Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk all have in common. And they're all afraid of the AI takeover, right? All of them. And they've gone on record and they've talked about it. One of the things that I was doing as I was getting prepared for this is that I started to pull out, I went and did a search of the 10 scariest things about AI, right? But just a couple of them I wanted to bring up is that, you know, we talk about all these great things, and, you know, and I really love, Scott talked earlier, and he brought up the role of guardrails as we start to move forward. And that's a government's role, that's a company's roles to really outline these guardrails. And we just talked about it here a little bit, but sometimes all those guardrails are not out there, right? We've talked about fintech and fraud today, and we've talked about, you know, the role of government and social investment and all these things. But, you know, the concerns that I think are brought up and are really prevalent is that people are utilizing not only data to help you, you know, from a healthcare standpoint or in the automotive space or in the financial space, but they're utilizing AI and all of this data for evil, right? And in some places right now, we're seeing it in a very, let's just say, very close proximity from here, where we're starting to now utilize AI to control social behavior and put almost like a credit rating, but it's a social rating that's starting to be put on a very large population, right? And so what are we going to do? We're going to get a society score. We're going to limit everyone's ability to travel or get on a bus or see their friends or take a vacation or do any of these things. It's starting to occur right now. And we may not even see it, but it's happening. And so we're seeing all that. We're seeing the fraud. We're seeing killing Main Street. We all loved going online and shopping all around the world because Why? Because we were able to get goods cheaper. But guess what? If we really sat back and thought about it, 10 years ago, we've probably seen a double and probably a triple in the cost of goods that we buy online now. Because online retailers have killed what we call in the US Main Street. We've killed retailers, we've killed malls, we've killed Main Street. I can take you into some of the largest cities in the United States and take you down miles of roads where there's not an open retail store in those towns and those communities. And those people, everyone says, oh yeah, but now I can buy it cheaper online. Well, guess what? You can't. Because now we've utilized AI and we've used data to figure out your buying behaviors. And now we're actually getting you to buy things that you don't want or buy more of what you don't want and putting it right in front of your face. So we start to look at those things, and that's where, you know, we really do need, I love this guardrails concept. I'm going to use it probably every day for the rest of my life, but it's really important for us as individuals, as investors, as government officials, as leaders, as business owners, to really think about how we're going to utilize this data and utilize it for good and set the parameters for good, because there's a lot of evil things we can do with it, and you can start to think about and make your own list. But that's kind of why I think I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But is that an existential risk? Maybe you could deal with that, Scott.
Wow, the philosophical.
That's
angle.
exactly what Elon Musk said.
Yeah, no,
Because, you know, that what you've described is evil deeds in society. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about an existential risk to humanity.
Well, I'm not going to get political as an American that works in China right now. I think there's, yeah, because they're listening. I mean, the reality is, you know, people talk about artificial intelligence race being more threatening than nuclear war now. I think we as a people have given up privacy for convenience, and you hit it with commerce. We have an entire generation in China that gives away everything about themselves, where they're at, what they're doing, who they're with. Now, on the back end of that, just within 2 or 3 years, we now have a social score. We know everything about you based on who you're with. Is that a fair judgment? I don't know. That's existential to me. Is that me as a person? Because I can tell you I have 3 personas online. If you can find the 4th, you know, I'll give you some money. You know, is that really us? That's the existential part. And I think when you come to AI, we've now built this into smart cities, into autonomous driving. You know, it's going to move us around. As an American, we have a Bill of Rights that says I can move freely. Well, if I'm in an automated car that Google controls, do I trust them to move me freely? No offense, right? There's an existential threat to us as people. And again, I think it depends on where you're from. You know, as an American, these are beliefs behind our Constitution that shall not be infringed, but they are being infringed, and we've let that be infringed. Facebook is in court, or is in Congress right now, talking about what they're doing with our data, because there is this threat. And I think it's real. Now, to get to the Elon Musk is going to Mars. I don't think Elon Musk is going to Mars because he thinks he's going to make money on that tomorrow. I think he thinks we need to go to Mars because something that dire is going to happen. I'm maybe not there, but he's a really smart guy. He's battling Mark Zuckerberg, who thinks, oh, it's just all, you know, Elon being crazy. You know, Elon is an engineer, Mark is not. Okay, I side with Elon. Physics versus, yeah. Again, I think we have to think about it now. I think we have the chance now. I think we can be responsible now. I think it gets down to being intelligent about how we train the AI. AI has to be taught, and has to be taught on unbiased data. I would say we're not doing that now. We do not have purely unbiased data. Most of the AI is training on how we shop and how we fly and how we eat. That is not the data that only data I want it to see. And I think that's our challenge. The world works on I was going to say the dollar or the renminbi or whatever, wherever you're from. And that's not always going to get us those data sets. There's a cost to it. That's the existential part to me. How do we do it? And the UN and these goals are trying to do that. So I guess that's a long answer to say, yes, I think there is something there, but I still think we have a chance to beat it. I think we are, as a species, very adaptable. We always have been. And we will be, and maybe that's on Mars.
Maybe we have a Hong Kong perspective now. Andy?
Yeah, if the question is, am I scared of what's going on in AI, I would use the word amazed, because I've been amazed with what AI has been doing for the past 30 years. I mean, even we have AI researchers doing natural language understanding, speech understanding, planning, robotics, and those innovations keep on coming. So I think it's amazing that what humans could do with ones and zeros. I think that's from my point of view. In terms of being scared of AI, I think some of the things that corporations are doing, like Google, opening up their APIs, opening up their source code, that kind of levels the playing field. Basically, anybody in the world, as long as you have access to internet, you can learn and acquire AI skills. Yam Kid talked about the farmer. There's also this kid, high school kid, Abu, from Google Developer I/O last year. So Abu is this 15-year-old who got interested in AI. And he learned how to program Python by watching YouTube videos. And then he got excited with Python capability, and he started to use Google TensorFlow to do some analysis images to identify diagnosed breast cancer. And his program was able to get to up to, I think, 95 or above accuracy. So it was pretty amazing. A high school kid, 15-year-old, with no training whatsoever, by the power of internet and open source, he was able to create something that no one else has ever been able to achieve. And now he's 17, and he started his AI company in healthcare. You might want to invest in.
Yeah, and I will say that 17 years ago we spent about $30 million trying to do the same thing, and it didn't work. So he's accomplished a great deal, and that's kind of the speed and the time, right?
Yeah, so it's amazing. So I think the word I would use is amazing, remarkable. The speed which AI is being developed, and the ease where people could pick up those technology is really empowering, and it's really encouraging.
Okay, Yamki?
I think around the question of is it existential, I would probably think of it this way, that first of all, there's nothing artificial about artificial intelligence, right? Human beings are in control of the technology. We are the ones, we human beings, you and I, our governments, the companies are the ones deploying these tools. So we can figure, it's not as if this is a monolithic machine that runs on its own, not at all. We're the ones in control, and we need to be held accountable to how we use it, how we handle the data, how we build trust in the system. That's absolutely the baseline. And I think there should be probably appropriate guardrails around certain things that you should not do, just like even before the days of AI. I don't think that really, it's not as if a pre-AI world and post-AI world things are different. There are certain principles and norms and user choice that I think are consistent pre or prior to AI, number one. Number two, in terms of existentialism, I think we are now coming into contact with a technology that can help solve significant, messy problems at scale that we weren't able to do before. We're able to tackle healthcare problems that are leading to millions of people potentially dying or hunger. And it is upon us as human beings to think about and use these to really help people. And I think that's the existential question that we need to be thinking about. What are we doing with this to help the human race, as opposed to the question of replacement that was floated on earlier?
Thank you. You know, I'd like now to open to the audience. You please ask your questions or make your comment, but make it brief so we could have as many comments as possible. Who would like to start first? Right at the back there, please.
Hi, I'm from Singapore. My name is Kang, Thank you very much for your contributions. I mean, it's very enlightening. But as I sit here and listen to you, I actually felt a sense of deja vu because in the 90s, I sat in a similar forum and they were talking about genetic engineering. And they also spoke about guardrails. And they also spoke about the benefits to mankind and feeding people. And now we have GMO, and we have, many things that we're concerned about regarding genetic engineering. But there's a whole area of guardrailing that is almost impossible, and that is the military, the defense industry. So how can we guardrail ourselves from autonomous weaponry? That's the question I want to ask the panel.
Thank you. Can we have two more questions, and then the panelists will answer them at the same time? Any other question? Yeah, okay, please.
Thank you very much for insightful discussions. Until now, I have heard that potential benefits and threats of artificial intelligence and also desirable human adaptation to new technologies. But we haven't talked about business models. Who will use those technologies to create new businesses or to make money? And then if we understand clearly, then we know what kind of guardrails we need to develop. So from my understanding, when we consider about data collection and processing characteristics of artificial intelligence, this industry is definitely network economy is prevailing, the principle of business creation and utilization. So we understand that artificial intelligence can be taken by existing platform companies like Google. And then the Google will utilize this network of data collection and processing to accommodate various technology companies. Then we are considering serious, not about artificial intelligence bias, but those big platform companies will manipulate so that various bad impacts can be expected. So then can you elaborate the business models you are considering when you develop new artificial intelligence technologies?
Okay, that's a very topical question as well. One more question, please. Shamshed.
Thank you. Fascinating debate. I was just wondering, we have touched on the issue of job losses from AI. There's also this dimension of the impact on inequalities. We did see a presentation of how it's going in terms of the worsening of the trends within countries, particularly of the inequality. Would artificial intelligence aggravate the divide between countries, given that those who are the source of production of artificial intelligence versus those at the margins who do not have access to it? And of course, there is a cost implication of that, but the productivity divide across countries, or those who possess artificial intelligence versus those who do not have, at least in the transition period until it's so accessible across the board.
Thank you. So there you are. We have three questions. The first one is, how do you guard rail on weapons? The second one is, how do we, well, basically guard rail, or how do, to make sure that the platform companies do not manipulate data for their own ends or even for other people's political ends. And the third question is the owners of AI. In fact, the countries that own it, or even within countries, the owners of the IP on AI would have advantage over those that do not have. How do we, what is the implication of this on inequality right now within and across countries? So you can answer all of them, and you can answer only one as you wish. Shall we just go starting from here, since you're the nearest one? You don't have to answer all three, but whichever one you
Yeah,
like.
I'm happy to touch on all of them. Maybe starting with the weaponization one. I think that's a terrific question. And having been in government before as well, thinking through some of those questions. I think, to your point, this is a challenge that actually may be unique to government. And international norms set by governments that bind themselves is probably the best path forward. Forums such as G20 is a natural one. We have touched on technology in the last couple of rounds. I think there could be a conversation among the heavy investors in military industrial complex that can probably focus in on that much more so than corporates because we're much more fragmented. On the question of platforms, I think that's a very, very important point, and I think it definitely hits home for some of us. I think one thing that's unique is that for platforms to work, you absolutely need to have the trust of the user. And that's something that we as Google think a lot about and design our product around. It's how do we protect the user, and the data belongs to the user. And I think some of the work that the Europeans have done around GDPR gets exactly at that. And we have designed our system where the user can, with portability, they can take their data and actually say, I don't want it on your platform, move it elsewhere, or just download it wholesale or delete it. That's possible. And I think as other companies move into the realm of data, they need to be thinking about how they are creating certain protections and building trust with the user in the very first instance, so that some of these technology can take off. The other part is that the data is not zero sum like a cup or a car is, right? You as a person can share data with multiple different entities, and you already do. Sometimes even within your own government, that one agency has one set of data, another agency has another set of data, and a third agency have a third set of data, and they're supposed to be the same, but you can have 3 different names, or ideally not, but sometimes that happens, or 3 different types of profile in that. And same thing in the commercial world, where there are actually lots of companies that already have some data on users, and they're thinking about how to create insights from it. And to your point about what industries, I think we're at the very beginning of thinking through that. We're seeing some test cases, some use cases, but that I think the opportunities are boundless. We heard earlier what banks are doing with data. We're going to be thinking through, insurance, other financial services, in terms of food, hotel, hospitality. I don't think there is a limit yet in terms of where it sits best with. I think there are going to be multiple industries that will be successful. The question is, are they able to turn data into insight? And some of the ways that will be done is through platforms, but they can also build their own system to do that. On the question of inequality, we are thinking very, very hard about that, which is one reason why we have purposely made our machine learning libraries open source and public, right? So that others can use the code that we've used and build other systems. And I think similar to what we've seen with Android, which we made open source, what it has done is actually drive down the cost of cell phones, so that shopkeepers, farmers can have them and use it to solve problems, to communicate with one another through it. It's actually, I think, maybe taking a longer time than we thought, but it's actually creating a more equal playing field that it used to be only certain people have information. Now everyone has access to information. I think AI technology is going to move the same way as well.
So I'm only going to answer the first 2. But, talking about the military and weaponry and things along those lines, I'm actually a little bit negative on the use of AI from that standpoint, because I think one of the things we've talked about here, and we've touched upon it a little bit, is that we as humans, and we can use some statistics and data, we talk about we're 1,000 times smarter than anything that we're going to be able to create from an AI standpoint. And a lot of that has been to do with emotions. And so one thing that you're not able to do or perfect yet, and what everyone talks about is, you can't teach a machine yet to have to be depressed or to have hallucinations or all these different things that go on. However, researchers at Georgia Tech University in Atlanta have actually already taught AI and I guess I should say robots in this case, how to actually even cheat and to lie. And so one of the biggest concerns about that is when you're cheating and you're lying, that can be actually used as deception and in deceptive practices specifically around military. And so when you utilize AI and you put it in robots, you can start to basically deceive and do different things in a military and a combat facility and whatnot. That's very scary. I look at those things and I think it's very scary. Now the flip side to it is the positive aspect of AI and putting a vehicle such as a robot with AI and teaching it. Maybe we limit the casualties, right? We limit the amount of people that are actually on the front line when we're looking at protecting military bases in different regions around the world. And we stop reading about a suicide bomber taking out 15 newly trained personnel or something along those lines in countries that we're trying to help and democratize and be able to sell their goods and use a phone to collect payments and whatever else and build those economies. So different things along those lines. But I will just say it's scary. It very much so is a scary thing. And then kind of moving over, with that same thought process here on the business models, I mentioned earlier is that we haven't even started to tap business models or the business value or anything. I talk a lot about, or I said, 17 years ago, I invested in a company to try and see how cancer metastasized and do those things and try to utilize data sets and all these things. And we tried to use the most powerful cameras in the world and pull all this technology. And what we learned was oncologists are wrong 100% of the time. It's either metastasized more or less, and no one was ever right. And I've followed this, and it's very important, right? But we start to think about what the business model is today and who's paying for it. So no matter where we're looking at things right now, I can tell you that from my perspective as an investor, I look at it as you need to have, and I always call this an ICQ VP. It's an instantaneous, compelling, quantifiable value proposition. So I only look at deals and look at companies that you can actually show me that you have a business model that's a quantifiable value proposition. I don't care that it's soft, it's pretty, and it's blue. I care that every time you use it, I get a 3x return on it. Now, where am I using that right now? And to your point, data. The number one thing that we can capture right now and monetize is a data marketplace. So whether we're looking at financial role, that we're looking at the automotive role, that we're looking at insurance, whatever it may be, data marketplaces are the ones where I'm seeing an actual multiple or some quantifiable value proposition. In the connected vehicle space, for example, the people that are paying the bills and want the data and want everything more valuable than anything right now are insurance companies. Because if you take a look at Japan, I'll use Japan as a great place, 20% of their, or 11% of their drivers are 65 plus that cause 20% of the accidents. In the United States, 11% of the drivers are 16 to 19 years old, and they cause 20% of the accidents. So we're looking at the insurance companies are trying to figure out, they want to make sure that I'm actually the one driving the vehicle and I have the policy, not my 16-year-old son. And so they want to be able to make sure that they're charging individuals the right way. And so you grab this data, you grab this information, you provide it in a data marketplace, and you sell that data. That's where we have the business models. Now, as we move forward, we're looking at blockchain, we're looking at fintech, we're looking at all these different areas. We're looking at bringing someone in Papua New Guinea on board to sell their goods that are made in their homeland and they want to sell them to somebody in Silicon Valley. What are we doing? What does that model look like? And we haven't even started to tap any of that. So once we start to tap those, I think the business models will continue to expand. But right now, if we have to put a quantifiable value proposition on it, I think the only thing that we're seeing right now is data. And we're seeing that in acquisitions of companies. Intel, as a chip company, can't get enough data anywhere. NVIDIA, Intel, all of these guys, Qualcomm, they're all making huge bets in AI. And they're chip companies. I mean, we're talking about chip companies betting on AI. So that's where it is.
So I'll come in on the business models because I agree. I think you have to separate the data models from the AI models. And then I'll add in, as you look at the other emerging technologies, I like the seams that are coming together around IoT creating data that we never saw before, that then empowers AI to do something that we didn't know it could do. So I think these seams of technologies, blockchain, again, my favorite, moving data out and making it pretty, visible to everyone in the network. So what we're seeing is the edge is there, those seams. I think data is still the core asset. And as you mentioned, we've gotten into this world where there's 6 or 8 companies that basically own all the data in the world right now. And 3 of them are in China and 4 of them are in the US or vice versa. So it's very concentrated. And again, that's where I worry that it is a bit concentrated. Now there's the right intentions, open sourcing, and then I'll go to the advantages. So in the Industrial Revolution, the advantage was I had the machine, you didn't. I can make more faster, you lose. Today, in this whatever revolution we're in, with open source, we've kind of leveled that to some degree because there's not as much of that physical advantage. So there is a bit more accessible to emerging markets immediately. You can go on GitHub no matter where you're at if you have an internet connection. So there's a little bit of barrier to entry. But cell phones have solved that. I can get online anywhere. So I think we're in a different world. So there's a bit more opportunity to even that playing field. Then it comes down to the creativity and the passion behind the people building that business, which I think is great. Not to say there aren't advantages. And then that'll tie into the third point. I think the next frontier for AI, and I won't get into weapons, but the fact is we're going to fight the cyber war to control the advantages that we have as a country or as an enterprise. And I think you're seeing AI hacking and AI hackers and leveraging this technology for bad in the sense of protecting what I have, trying to figure out what you have, et cetera. So while I follow Boston Dynamics and the robots they're making that open doors and scare me, I think I'm more worried about what's happening in the cyber world that AI is impacting. The physical world, there's less and less soldiers that are going to be on the battle lines because it'll be robots. That's great. Less humans dying. So the business models, I think, data's still the asset. We've been through big data. I'm more interested in kind of the lean data that can help us build better algorithms. There are models that people are going after to be the best algorithm with whatever data you give me and separating that. Democratizing who owns that data, I think, is important. But you're seeing countries really put bigger walls up now, provincial protection of data, to help the consumer. I'm not sure that's the case, but that's what's happening, so it's becoming more difficult. So I think it's all intertwined, actually, the way those questions were asked, as I see it. It's this evolution we're going through. As the data's been created and it's there forever, we want to make money on it or we want to help society with it, and with that we need AI. But with that, there's bad people that will attack us with it. So I think it fits together.
Well, I'll just add my two bits on that. With military, I think it will be great that we use AI in military because we'll just let the AI-enabled robots fight among themselves and humans just stand behind them. Yeah, yeah, we'll be fine, jokingly. I just want to add a bit about inequality in terms of countries with AI and countries without AI. Definitely open source and open API is sort of leveling the field, but that is only at the algorithm level. Gentlemen talk about data. Currently with AI, machine learning, algorithm isn't that much important. We basically use similar algorithms. It's the data that is most important. Data is still king. So in the academic field, what's happening is that a lot more and more people are opening up their data. There's this open data movement where we're trying to level the playing field for researchers using the same shared data set to do experimentation, to do benchmarking. And I think that would be, that is definitely a way that we should encourage other companies to do. is I think it's beneficial. It's win-win because once you have open data sets that everyone uses the same for benchmarking, you'll be able to evaluate outcomes more precisely. And then the other point about business model, I think in the future, I was giving a talk in an HR conference recently, and the question was, in the future, if AI is going to replace a lot of humans, what would the HR department do? They will be AI resource management. They will be responsible for hiring AI skill sets. And that's a legitimate question, because in the future, we will have narrow, although narrow, but AI expertise created by all these companies, different startups. There's a forecast that in 2 years, all customer service agents will be AI agents. And companies that requires customer service agents will be buying these AI from different companies. So the question will be for HR professionals is, how do you evaluate these AI services? Which AI is smarter than other? How do you evaluate competency? And then the other thing that you also need to evaluate is emotion. Could these AI agents recognize emotions? Will they react appropriately to emotions? And then the third is, will they be moral and ethical? Obviously this scenario with self-driving cars. If your self-driving car is in a situation where you either crash into a bunch of people, or the self-driving car hits a wall and self-destruct, which would be more moral, ethical? So ideally, the self-driving car will have to self-destruct, killing the driver. Then the question is, if it's so moral, would you buy such a car that is programmed potentially to kill yourself? So one way, one side we want AI to be moral, to be ethical, but on the other side we don't want it to be that ethical, that moral.
But the good news is we're all moving to the largest cities in the world, into these smart cities, so we'll all start taking a bike. So.
Yeah, you all place a great deal of importance on data algorithm based on data, etc. What do you see? Do you see the possibility in the near future or in the future of machine learning replacing a large part of the data? And I say this, and this is something I mentioned earlier. If you all remember the machine that beat the chess player and beat other games players, and the AlphaGo, that's a lot of where the machine gets a lot of data input. About 6 months ago, there is something called AlphaZero, where no data was input in the machine. To play chess, the machine is only given the rules of chess, and then it started playing just based on the rules. It figures out how to play chess based on the rules. And the first time it played exactly like a human being who followed the rules and never played chess. But in perhaps a few hours, is played 1 million times. And it's now, nobody can beat it, because it's not based on any games that have ever been played. It's not based on any data. It's just something that the machine figures out itself. So is this an isolated incident? Because what I read is that in AlphaZero, it can now play any games better than any machine that has been fed with data, no matter how deep the data, is now the best game player in the world. And you can feed it with any games, any rules. So how does that affect what you've all been saying earlier, that data is the key?
Well, maybe I'll start. So in certain disciplines like game playing and maybe image recognition, object recognition, definitely generating random examples will be much faster than feeding it with actual examples. But in other areas, it might not apply that well. For example, where you need to where you need to drive a car potentially, you could generate some examples, but you know how to control a mechanism, or examples of where you need to do problem solving, where you need processes and steps. So I don't think that generating random examples to for an AI to learn from itself will be a solution to all problem domains. However, it is very useful in certain domains and has been proven, like your example, to be highly efficient.
Yeah, I'll give one, maybe two examples. So I think we're already there. I think, like you said, in certain domains. So one example I can think of is simulating customer behavior in a population that's hard to collect data on. So you know we've built simulation models on small sets of data to create large sets of data that we can then train AI around customer behavior. And if you think about China, in general, it's hard to get detailed customer data across a large data set before BAT existed. Now they have great data, but only as it exists around commerce. So if you're looking at behaviors, you actually have to simulate that. So we've done a lot of work in simulation modeling around customer behavior or populations. In the U.S., we've created a 350 million set of population data that is synthetic. So it's synthetic, but based on the real data that we can get. But you typically can't get data across that broad of a set. The other example I'll give is in, again, simulating business models or strategies. Because a lot of that is a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncontrollables. So you have to run multiple simulations. And I can't give the name, but we worked with a large auto manufacturer that was trying to make the decision around going into the autonomous vehicle business. So there's obviously a lot involved in doing that. Not only the manufacture of the car, but all the way down to how customers would use it. So we actually were able to create a simulation model that ran 200,000 business scenarios of how they would structure that to help them make the decision about how to make an investment, which before would have been done through probably meetings and conversations and talking to smart people, focus groups. We actually built an AI to simulate and then select the right way forward for the business. And it was actually very contrary to what they had thought going in as a hypothesis-driven approach like humans do. But it used data, it used mini AI, so agent-based modeling within a simulation model, and it did that in 200,000 different ways, and then selected or at least gave some options that were the most effective way forward. They ended up buying another company and doing a JV in a certain way that they had never thought of. So that was simulating the future of that business 5 and 10 years out, the returns of that business. So, I mean, we're getting close to that. So I think simulating data is one aspect, and then simulating decisions is another. And as those come together, and then you can actually measure that and monitor it over time to see how accurate it was, and then go back and tune those models for the next one. So it's pretty exciting. I think it's still early days. I agree it's not all domains. It doesn't, you have to have very tangible areas to simulate.
I think when in domains where the variables, factors are well defined and well understood, in problems where we try to, for example, in fintech, we try to predict market behavior to certain events. Simulating that is difficult because humans are emotional; they react differently.
Predictably irrational.
Irrationally, so that might be hard to really generate samples for.
Yeah, I would certainly echo those. We're very proud of AlphaGo and GoZero and the work that it's done, but it is very in a very specific narrow domain that a very clear set of rules that it's trying to create a data set around. What I think we're talking about here is really around human data or human-related data, which is messy and complex. And it's actually not about the size of the data, although that is one aspect of it, but you actually get to some diminishing return, and you actually need good applicable data that is good for that particular model, or else we've been sitting on data for a while. A lot of organizations, you can take a bank. They sit on lots of data, but they still make poor decisions around around financing, around credit risk, and etc. So the question isn't about whether or not you have data, but you have the right set of data and a right question that you're trying to solve, and then to match the two with human ingenuity to think about what that's going to be.
So I just want to add one little bit to it here, and I know we're kind of moving down in time, but I think your point is dead on. We have lots of data, but the data that I think we've all talked about that has value is contextual rich data. And I think that's a combination of the data, that this mass amounts of data, it's some combination of synthetic data that is for very specific targeted areas or end markets or whatever it is we're trying to solve. And then I also believe there's a very heavy opportunity moving forward in predictive analytics as well. And I think that combination of all of that really is where you build, maybe it's where you build the business model and utilize it for safety and security in different environments or whatever it may be. And that's kind of what I think. And then, I think the one thing that we as a society, globally, we've been utilizing so much data, so much AI, so much technology. We've actually haven't solved all of the problems. And we, going all the way full circle back here to the UN issues, right? We talk about, we have all these problems in these sustainable cities that we still have to deal with. We have, Waze and mapping companies and all these things all over the place. But why the hell is traffic so bad everywhere, right? I think it's made it worse. And I can tell you it makes it worse in my neighborhood because now all of a sudden I see cars where I never even saw cars before. But traffic congestion, new technology, and mixing that with government, we have this huge conversion, right? And we need to figure out how we're going to meld new ideas, new technology with old laws and old processes. And I think when companies come out with great ideas or great technology and they're very focused on that and solving a problem, that's where I think our opportunities will be generated and made. And I just was trying to pull the UN part back into this, but it's all important for society and communities and sustainability because it all goes hand in hand. Right?
Good. Thank you. Now, any burning question from the floor? No? Okay, then I ask my next question. Some of you in fact, let me put it this way. Are we at risk of humanized AI or robots? I start with saying that we get a lot of our information on AI and robots from the movies. And there we humanize them. They have the same emotions that we do. So, and the assumption here, what I'm hearing, is that they can't be as intelligent as we are because they don't have emotions. So my question really is that for machines, do they have to be emotions to be as intelligent as we are?
My wife says I have no emotions, so I'm not sure we need that. Yeah.
Same here.
I'll start quickly. I think, in my own perspective, I think we've turned this corner on AI for one really human reason. For 30 or 40 or 50 years, we've looked at this as, and I'm sorry, but as an academic, as a research, as a mathematical problem. AI in the last 5 years has learned sensing, it's learned thinking, and it's learned acting, and that's how we think about it. So sensing, because we've made such progress on computer vision, the way we all interact is eye to eye, and now the computers start to recognize faces. Computers can start to recognize speech. Now, it's been a long, in the past few years, language and context has become something that they understand. And I say they, as if it's a person, right? Because I think AI has turned the corner and now interacts with us in a way we understand as humans, through our senses. So vision, speech, even sense and touch. so they've always been good at thinking, maybe just in narrow areas, but when you tie that to sensing, it becomes more natural. So I think we're starting to accept it more. I don't think it's necessarily because it's advancing, like it hasn't, before. I think that's that human connection. I think we'll always have more EQ than they'll have more IQ. Do they need emotion? I'm not sure, because they're about we use these tools to be more efficient or to create new things, and that's not an emotional thing necessarily. But again, I think as we start to bridge that gap, it becomes a little bit weird. The singularity. We won't go there, but I think it's that sense connection that makes it more. And you said the embodied AI is more comfortable for us, but the reality is they don't need to look like humans, but it's more comfortable for us.
Yeah. Any more words on? Yes, Andy?
I agree. I mean, once upon a time, we thought that AI has to behave exactly like a human before humans would accept the technology. But we have started to get so accustomed to technology like Siri and Alexa, and they don't talk like humans, but we use it all the time. So it begins to that doesn't really matter, as long as it does good work, helps us out. The example I always use for my students is that you saw Star Trek, Spock. He's not an AI, but he has no emotion.
Yeah.
And he works well with human beings, right? Focus. So.
Yeah. Well, Scott said earlier, the best CEO would be an AI-based robot, right? No emotion, right? Just makes very clear-cut decisions, right? And I think, if we talk about Star Trek, I'm a Trekkie, but I also like Star Wars. But we're way past so many of these. We're so past so many of these technologies, and I think, as we start to move forward with robots and AI and packaging AI and whatever else. I mean, there's a company I worked with, and they can basically take 37 different languages and do over 300 commands in each language right now. I mean, it's insane. And we talk about Google Voice and Amazon Alexa and Watson, but this other company, it's called Fluent.ai. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing what's happening. And but I do think that we are living now in a software world, not a hardware world. And I think to that point, I'll just say is that we're more accepting of flaws, right? Nothing's perfect right now. We're accepting of flaws. But as a software in the software world, we're going to put out version 1.1 tomorrow and 1.2 in a couple of months. And you guys will all update it, and we'll all feel good. So that's how it works, right?
Yeah, Yam Key, representing Google. We will have Google have the last word.
Usually you give us the first word, and then we look forward to giving an answer. So
did you mean?
So I think this is a more philosophical question, and there is how machines respond to us. And then there's a question of what makes human human. Emotion's one part of it. Empathy is another part, and that's actually a criteria that computers have done really poorly at the moment. And we think about the things that bring us joy are great poetry, great music, amazing photos and landscapes, and those. And then computers are starting to do better as well. We have various fun tool sets called AI experiments where you can actually interact with the computer, where it creates different tunes for you. But what's really amazing, what we've seen is that what it is actually, it helped make people smarter because it helped unblock a particular path of thinking that we didn't think about before. And that gives us joy. The moment when someone actually says, wow, I haven't thought about that before. Now that creates new ideas and new ways to relate, using that and relating it to another human being or another concept or another industry. I think that's what's going to make humans human, and where I think machines actually will be helpful to us as we create this new set of possibilities.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a great discussion. Please, thank you, all our panelists. Can we give them a great...
Thank you so much for the great discussions, and please remain on stage for a good photo. So would our panelists and Professor Maynard stand closer together for group photo? Thank you. Thank you once again for enlightening us on the topic, the artificial intelligence revolution. Thank you very much, and please be seated. So now, let's invite Engineer Alan Yeung, Government Chief Information Officer, Innovation and Technology Bureau, Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, China, on stage to introduce the discussion for tomorrow, day 2 of the APBF. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to welcome Engineer Alan Yeung.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and friends from overseas. I hope you enjoy a full day of very insightful and informational sharing. It comes down to the last session of today, so I'm the one standing between you and the cocktail. So I promise it will be quick, informational, if not as inspirational. I can't escape a chance to introduce Hong Kong infrastructure on digital side before letting you go for enjoying the cocktail. So first, our Hong Kong's advantages has been well known in a few regards, being at a strategic location, as a south tip of mainland China, and also well connected with the Asia countries, being safe, being world's freest economy, and also have sound legal system. What may not be as well known to many of you is our competitiveness in the digital infrastructure. So we actually have been ranked consistently in the digital competitiveness as Asia's number 2 and world's number 7. And another aspect which is also as important is the digital security. And we rank number 5 in 2017. Also, we have very, very reliable power supply. And why is that important to bring this up? In fact, we have 99.999% in terms of our power reliability. And this is important because this power is powering our data center, which also is very important infrastructure to supporting the financial sector of Hong Kong, like stock exchange. Think of if we have any power glitch and it affects millions and dollars of stock transaction if that happens. So it's very important that in order for Hong Kong to be very central as a financial services center, power supply, data center will be very vital. And speaking of that, we are also having a broadband penetration 92.3%, and also average internet speed being number 4 in the world. And the peak connection time is 129 megabit per second. And so our mobile penetration rate is 2.5 phones per person. So that's a bit too much in a sense. We are also doing quite well in the e-commerce area, which counts for 5.3% of our business receipt, and also well ranked number 16. So how do we enable all this e-commerce, data center? Is all related to the interconnectivity between Hong Kong and the rest of the world. So they are now being connected by 11 submarine cables, and all together it gives us over 50 terabit per second. And this will be expanded by the end of the year when the new cable from Los Angeles to Hong Kong is alive. you would add another 120 terabit per second. So an increase of 2.2 fold. And so we would be at 170 terabit per second. And 2 years later, will be another 150 terabit per second added to Hong Kong. So what does it all mean of these numbers? Think of all mainland China. Their international connectivity is about 10 terabit per second today. So Hong Kong would be 170. And so Hong Kong becomes a very important gateway between mainland and the rest of the world. So I think that is very important role for Hong Kong to play in the digital world. This AAE1, Asia, Africa, European 1 cable, which is turned on last year, connect Hong Kong to Paris. And that particular route is very, very a semblance to the Maritime Silk Road. So for Hong Kong to play an active role in the One Belt One Road, I think that is a very telling picture, and how the digital side of the connection from Hong Kong would be very essential and vital. Now I talk about the bottom layer, which is the interconnectivity. Then the second, the layer above would be data centers. So when you have a lot of pipes drawing in the traffic and the data, the data center resemblant of containers of data. And so we already have over a dozen global high-tier data center established in Hong Kong. And last year, we have added AWS and Google. And then Huawei announced to add their data center in Hong Kong as well. And all these are high-tier data center, and they are as vital as the financial services as needed to be. We facilitate this as a digital infrastructure. And why is that important? Because that would then enable all the innovation on top. And that's where I think the startups, the SMEs, and the global business can transact their digital services through this digital infrastructure. And that's why I think it's important. Just last session, the panel talked about data. And the data needs to flow, the data needs to aggregate, the data needs to be analyzed. And we propose Hong Kong can be a very neutral place because of this digital infrastructure in place to take that neutral zone for data exchange and data analytics to happen globally. So let me switch gear to smart city vision. The government has promulgated the smart city blueprint in December last year, and we aim to build Hong Kong as a world-class smart city through innovation and technology. And we obviously would like to enhance our quality of living and also enhance our economic development. And so the whole blueprint have grouped under 6 major development areas, being in smart mobility, smart living, smart environment, smart people, smart government, and smart economy. And it's very important to point out that we have set up a very high-level steering committee on innovation and technology. It's chaired by our chief executive herself. And also, there is a new smart city office underpin the committee to drive the implementation and making progress. So we published this blueprint. We coined it as 1.0 in last December. As we move forward, we will publish updates as a blueprint 2.0 and so on. So it would continue to add onto the latest development and build Hong Kong as a smart city as a journey. There is no really a hard end to it. So the last thing that I would like to encourage everyone, after 2 days APBF, there is another 2-day just as impactful and insightful, eventful conference. It's called Internet Economy Summit, to be held on the 12th and 13th. In fact, these back-to-back conferences were initially my idea. So I'm so glad the UN APBF had taken it up, and now it happened. We were talking about this just a year back, and we are now actually into that particular day one of APBF. And I welcome everyone to take your time to also join us for the IES 2 days later. So this concludes my closing remark. I hope everyone have a very enjoyable day one. And there will be also another 1 full day tomorrow, and I would look forward to more insightful and sharing. Thank you very much for staying with me before rushing out for your cocktail.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen, for your sharing. And the afternoon session has come to an end. Thank you for joining us today. Also, for those who haven't got a copy of the newest publication, please go to the KPMG booth at the foyer to get one. And do join us for the cocktail session. The cocktail reception is open at the Cyberport Arcade, and please follow our staff to proceed the area. It's a few minutes walk from here, so we'll be very happy to see you all there. Feel free to relax, to have some drinks, and also enjoy the cultural performances we prepared for you. Also, the gala dinner will be held at the Golden Lilies Banquet Hall after the cocktail. So for those who have registered for the gala dinner, please arrive on time at 6:30 p.m. And remember, please keep your delegate badge for Day 2 conference. And for those who wish to join the Happy Wednesday tomorrow, please let us know tomorrow. Thank you very much.